ahead and start. We will call this meeting to order. We'll begin with item number 2, Ab361 Findings. That will be with Keith Lemieux.
Sure. This is a reaffirmation of our ability to do the meetings electronically, both for this meeting and for the PAC and TAC. Ab361 required us to make certain findings that, because of the public health emergency, it would be unwise to have the meeting, to require that the meeting be 100% attended in person. Again, we're not planning on altering how we're doing the meetings. These meetings are open to the public, but we're allowing for the possibility of people to call in based on both because the PAC and TAC have additional considerations concerning the number of people involved, and also because this agency straddles multiple jurisdictions that have separate health issues or policies going on at the same time. So what we're recommending is that you adopt a motion reaffirming the findings made at the prior resolution, which I don't have the number in front of me. Do we have the number, April?
0721.
So it would be a motion to adopt the findings of Resolution 0871.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Chairman Heyman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Ratora, Director Peters,
Aye.
Director Itmeyer,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Okay, very good. We will now move on to item number 3, public comment on closed session. Do we have any public comment on closed session? Okay, seeing none and none from the floor, we will move to closed session. Go ahead and move to open session. We'll begin with report out on closed session.
Sure. Good morning, Mr. Chair and gentlemen of the board. Board met in closed session to discuss the items identified on the agenda. There was no reportable action taken. Mr. Chair, that concludes the report.
Thank you. So if everyone will follow me with the Pledge of Allegiance. Face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And a moment of silence. Okay, let's move to roll call.
Chairman Heyman,
Present.
Vice Chair Ratora,
Present.
Director Peters,
Present.
Director Itmeyer,
Present.
Director Vallejo.
Present.
Okay, moving on to item number 6, public comment. This time is reserved for the public to address the board about matters not on the agenda. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. We'll begin with the phones. Do we have any public comment online? Okay, seeing none, any public comment from the floor? Okay, seeing no public comment, we'll move on to item number 7, consent agenda. Item A, approve minutes of the board meeting October 13th, 2021. Item number B, resolution 09-21, approval of PAC membership application for Regina Troglin. Item 7C, approve expenditures. C1, $51,093.35 to Stetson Engineers. Item C2, $20,377.25 to Regional Government Services. Item C3, $10,000 to Capital Core Group. And item C4, $314.80 to Well Intel.
Chairman, before we approve the consent agenda, I believe there was a late caller for public comment. I don't know if you would prefer that we take that. But
Yes, let's go ahead. We'll back up, and we do have a public comment that we'll take. Okay, caller, go ahead.
Yes, this is Mike Neal. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Mike, go ahead.
Okay, I've got essentially, I guess it's a comment and a question here. Some time back, there was a discussion and presentation of the letter from the DWR offering to help with facilitation of arbitration between the numerous parties involved in the water issue dispute around the valley. And since that time, there's been a blackout, basically, of anything said, mentioned, talked about of that, I think, pretty much since that offer was made. So I want to know, is there any movement on that? Is this board giving it any consideration? If there's been any letter of any sort, I'd like to see that made available to the public so that we can know what's going on with this. We have the right to know what's happening about these things. This is one of the most divisive issues in this valley, and I personally would like to be kept up to date, and I'm quite sure a number of other people would also. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have another caller? Caller, go ahead.
Yes, this is Joshua Nugent from Mojave Pistachios and Nugent Ranches. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Josh, go ahead.
Great. I just wanted to say that we are quite excited about the facilitation process, and we look forward to getting a chance to get everyone in the same room and talk about a lot of these issues on the agenda today. I was just wondering if anyone representing the board as a whole, and then if any of the member agencies, including the Navy and BLM, would feel comfortable commenting on their thoughts on the facilitation process, and then if you guys have heard anything or had any dates, because we were, kind of trying to figure out when they're going to be able to have time to do that. So I appreciate any answers you guys can give. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Do we have another caller? Caller, go ahead.
Yes, my name's Elaine Mead. Are you still taking public comment?
Yes, Elaine, we are.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering if there was any update on DWR and the facilitation process. If somebody could maybe comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Elaine. Does any
Thank
board
you.
members have any comment? Okay. So we don't have any comment at this time, Elaine. We will take that under consideration. Thank you. We'll just clear up the phone lines first, and then we'll... Okay, seeing no further public comment on the phones, we will go ahead and take public comment from the floor.
Nick Panzer, thank you, Chair. Hearing these three call, I got to say, yeah, I'm anxiously waiting to hear answers from those questions. They seem like very legitimate questions to me, and I too would like to hear from each of those board members who represent interested parties on that DWR letter. I think we deserve an answer. Thank you.
This is Wes Castenstein. It seems like if there is a facilitation process, we should all be invited to it, the various stakeholders. And of course, my thought is that we went through that whole process before and as part of creating the GSP. There were a lot of meetings and a lot of facilitation, so I can't see really anything new being brought up that wasn't already discussed. But on the other hand, if there is a process and if it's going to make findings, it might be better if all stakeholders had an opportunity to participate and be made aware of it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Judy Decker, Eastern Kern County Resource Conservation District representative on the PAC. The Eastern Kern County Resource Conservation District did send a letter requesting to be part of this facilitation project. If you process, I should say. If you don't know, the RCD represents all of the landowners that lie within the boundaries of Eastern Kern County. So we represent all of the landowners who live or don't live but own property in the Indian Wells Valley. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and move back to item number 7, the consent agenda, as I previously read. Does any member of the public wish to pull an item? Any member of the board wish to pull an item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to board for a motion.
I'll make a motion on the consent agenda.
Second. The magic thumb went away.
There we go. Chairman Heyman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Rotorua,
Aye.
Director Peters,
Aye.
Director Itmeyer,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Okay, moving on to item number 8, Water Resources Manager Report.
Okay?
We're okay for the moment.
Okay. I'll stop if we have to. Thank you.
Steve, it's on you. Yep, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the board, good to see everybody, and the audience and everybody who's online. It's good to be here. I missed last time, and I apologize for that. A lot of things came up, but it is good to be here. We have Joseph Montoya from my staff and my office and Heather Steele that are on the line, and they will help me walk through updates on the Water Resource Manager report. So the first one is our grant status, Prop 1, Prop 68. I think, Joseph, you should be on the line to walk through, please.
Yes. Good morning, Steve, and good morning, members of the board and the public. As Steve said,
We could barely hear you, Joseph. You can talk right in or turn your volume up.
Okay, is that better?
A little better.
Can you guys hear me okay?
A little better. Go higher.
How about now?
Maybe a little more.
Okay.
We're a lot of old people here, me included.
Let me see if I can switch my audio. Maybe you guys can hear me better.
Yeah, that's better now.
Okay, great. So, yeah, as Steve said, I'll be reporting on item 8A, the grant funding for Prop 1 and Prop 68, and 8B, the first item for the recycled water program. So starting with the Prop 1 slide, I unfortunately don't have much of an update compared to the last board meeting. For invoices 10A and 11A, we have not received any responses from DWR yet on those invoices. If you'll recall, for invoice 10A, we did receive some comments a few months ago from DWR about updating appropriate mileage rates and the eligibility of certain equipment costs under the SDAC program. We resubmitted that invoice 10A back in early October. And as I just said, we have not received any response yet from DWR on the status of that invoice. And the same goes for invoice 11A. We submitted this invoice package on August 30th. And again, we have not received any word from DWR whether they're requesting comments or clarifications on this invoice package, and we have not received payment for this invoice yet. I do have a little bit of an update as far as the next invoice package we'll be preparing, which is due at the end of this month, November 30th. This will be invoice number 12A under Prop 1. If you'll recall, we were required as part of the terms of our funding agreement with DWR to prepare a CEQA concurrence. And as I reported last month, that concurrence has been completed. And so because of that, we can now go back to invoices 8A and 9A and seek reimbursement for some of the costs that were requested in those invoices that were under the construction element of our grant agreement. And those costs totaled about $130,000. So we will be, again, seeking reimbursement for those costs as part of invoice number 12A, which we'll be preparing in the coming weeks to submit by the end of this month. So that's all I have as far as Prop 1. Now moving on to the next slide, Prop 68. Again, I do not have an update on the status of invoices 10B and 11B. We've submitted those invoices on May 28th and August 30th. We have not received word from DWR on the status of their review of these invoices and whether they've been approved for payment, but we'll be continuing to look out for that. And similar to Prop 1, we'll be preparing a new invoice package for Prop 68, number 12B, that we'll be submitting at the end of this month as well. And if you'll recall, we have been working with DWR on an amendment to our funding agreement for Prop 1 and Prop 68. And the purpose of this amendment was to extend the schedule of certain work under the SDAC program and to add $30,000 of reappropriated grant funding that was awarded to the GA, but was contingent on the state's future appropriations of funding. So we've been working with DWR on preparing those draft amendment documents for our funding agreement, and those included a scope of work budget and a work schedule for all of the items under the funding agreement. We submitted drafts of those documents on August 23rd, and a few weeks ago, on October 22nd, we received some comments from DWR on those documents. We're currently working on addressing DWR's comments. We hope to resubmit those amendment documents very early next week in order to keep the amendment process rolling. And before I move on to the recycled water program, I just want to provide one last update. Steve had reported at our last meeting that we would be preparing a summary of Prop 1 and Prop 68 reimbursement requests and payments to summarize where we're at as far as our total amount of grant funding awarded, what's been requested, and what has actually been paid to the GA. Now, incidentally, that info had been provided recently to the GA staff during their preparation of the 2022 budget, which you'll be hearing about shortly. But we will be preparing sort of a more formal presentation of this summary to the board at the next meeting in December.
Yep.
we'll be continuing to prepare that in the next few weeks.
Thank you, Joseph. Yeah, just a highlight on that is we've been reporting on Prop 1, Prop 68 for months now, and you've been seeing requests and payments. We thought it'd be a good idea for you to see a summary of everything that's gone on, the original award, and what's been requested, and what we've been received, and what's left. So that's the whole idea of this. Part of the delay in getting that to you for this meeting was a lot of work's been done on the financials and the budgets, and we want to make sure they're consistent before we give you anything. So now that the budgets and the financials are being pulled together, we should be able to bring it back for the December meeting and have everybody see how the whole grant funding process has evolved up to date. Okay. Thanks, Joseph. We can move on.
Okay, so moving on to 8B, the first item is the recycled water program. I have a lot of updates to present here. First, the alternatives analysis scope of work. If you'll recall, we sent this scope of work out to the TAC on October 12th for their review. We received several comments from the TAC members as well as from the city and their consultant in the wastewater treatment plant upgrades, as well as verbally from the Navy at the last board meeting. So we're continuing to review and incorporate all of those comments into the scope of work and hopefully finalize that within the next few days. For section 1 of our analysis, again, this is a sort of documentation of the existing wastewater treatment facility, existing uses of recycled water, and the city's current plans to expand and upgrade the wastewater treatment facility. We sent a draft of this section to the TAC on October 19th, and again, we have received some comments from some of the TAC members, and are currently, again, reviewing and incorporating those comments. For section 2 of our analysis, this is a characterization of the effluent quantity and quality coming out of the wastewater treatment facility. I reported last month that this section would be largely based on a recent tech memo prepared by Provost and Pritchard that was provided to us from the city's consultant, Mike Nunley, on projected populations within the city, wastewater treatment plant influent flow rates, and BOD loading. So again, that tech memo is the large foundation for this section. We've also received some input from the city on the anticipated quality of the effluent coming out of the wastewater treatment plant once it's fully completed. We had anticipated that we would be releasing a draft of this section in late October, but unfortunately we've experienced some delays in getting that out, in part because we've been conducting some additional internal reviews at our level for this section. We're hoping to get this section out to the technical team, which, just as a reminder, includes the city and their consultant, as well as the water district's consultant, Krieger and Stewart. So we're hoping to get this section out to the technical team sometime next week for their review. And now for section 3, this section is basically an identification of the recycled water alternatives that we're considering, and those include landscape irrigation, surface spreading, deep injection, and direct use alternatives as well. And part of this section will include a prioritization of the alternatives, at least on a preliminary level, based on the available data that we've seen so far as the alternatives. This section we're still working on. We've got a draft ready for internal staff review for the most part, and we're hoping, again, to release this to the technical team most likely within the next 2 weeks. And as far as our next steps that we'll be taking before the next board meeting, as I said, we'll continue working on sections 2 and 3 of our analysis, continuing looking at regulatory and permitting requirements, because that will be the basis for our following section 4 of our analysis. And I reported last month that we would be hoping to schedule a meeting with our technical team, including the city and the water district's representatives, Krieger and Stewart. We'd hoped to schedule a meeting sometime in late October, but unfortunately we just weren't able to get together for scheduling a meeting at that time. So we're hoping to schedule a meeting in the coming weeks as well to at least go over our conclusions for the first two sections and our work schedule going forward for us to complete this analysis. So that wraps up my updates for the recycled water program.
Great, great. Thank you, Joseph. I'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the surface percolation replenishment study. There's no PowerPoint on this, but I just wanted to give an update to the board, the staff, but the board, and certainly the audience. I have reviewed the internal draft of that document. Steve Reich of my office, the hydrogeologist, prepared it. He's given a couple of reports in past meetings. I've reviewed an internal draft. We have sent it to the groundwater authority, the authority's staff team, internal. So they're looking at it now. It was last week that we distributed that to the team. I haven't got any comments back, but the goal right now is to either get comments or complete it as at least a final draft after the staff team, the GA staff team, and then send it to the TAC probably next week. So you can count on seeing this next week. I've already communicated with April about packaging that up and getting that out. So we'll get that out to the TAC next week. So that's the report on the surface percolation replenishment study. The next item is the shallow well impact identification, evaluation, and mitigation program. And this has been going on for a little while. There is a PowerPoint here, and there's some draft text of the policy in the packet, so you have both. Obviously, the PowerPoint was taken from the draft policy. Just as a heads up on this item and on the temporary use policy, which is coming up later, which I'm going to report on also, there's been some adjustments in the way the staff ultimately agreed to present this to the board, and as much detail as originally was being put into both the temporary use and into the shallow well mitigation evaluation study. The way the staff is presenting it to the board now as draft policy is more of a guidelines on how to address a shallow impacted well that may be brought to the board or to the staff and then ultimately to the board, rather than trying to put all the details of how the evaluation may go. It's set up more as a guideline. I know that we got comments on a previous draft that included things like hauling water for somebody who had a well that went completely out of service. That is not in this policy, but you'll notice that it is a policy set up to be based upon a case-by-case evaluation. So effectively, anything that an impacted shallow well owner feels needs to be submitted to this GA staff to be ultimately evaluated and brought to the board can be brought in on the report form and ultimately provide the data and ask for help for whatever is needed. And again, it's set up at this point as a reimbursement rather than upfront payment. So I'm just going to walk through real quick some of the key points that are in the policy right now. And this is from the PowerPoint. We talk about the fact that we're in overdraft, which is just introductory to the program. Shallow wells, a little discussion about what they do, what they actually serve, and what they're used for, the shallow wells. Identification of in the GSP of project number 4, which is a program to help impacted shallow wells. That's part of the GSP that we're following. The program, the way the policy is set up, would be implemented and managed by the authority staff under the direct direction of the board itself on a case-by-case basis. So you're going to see that theme throughout these types of policies that the staff's trying to put together. The program is dependent on the well owner certainly reporting, filling out the report form on impacts, and the well owner providing appropriate information on a well evaluation, recommendations on what the issues are with the well, what the cause may be, and what the remedy may be. That information has to be provided for the staff to review it. In addition, which may be obvious, but we want to make sure it's in the policy, certainly the well the shallow well needs to be properly registered with the authority in order to start the evaluation. So that's an assumed it will be done, but we, as a staff, we need to make sure that that's been done. So it involves submittal of the completed report form and submittal of a complete evaluation and performance review by qualified licensed well drilling and equipment contractor, which there's plenty in this area. The way it'll work is staff will acknowledge receipt and ultimately evaluate completeness and acknowledge with the impacted well owner completion of the documents. And then within 90 days, the staff will produce a staff report, a draft staff report with recommendations. The intention is that staff report would be coordinated with the well owner, be a part of the development of the staff report, so there's no surprises. This draft report would be reviewed by the well owner prior to being submitted brought to the authority board for action. When it is brought to the board for action, there will certainly be an opportunity for the well owner to address the board. So it'll be transparent and open. And then whatever costs that are allocated or authorized by the board to address the impacted well would be managed then by the general manager. So that's as I mentioned, more of a guidelines than it is specific evaluation criteria and how we would be looking at things. And each case would be, I think, maybe a little bit different. And obviously, it's pretty obvious to us, and I'm sure it's important to you folks out there. It's important that there's consistency in the evaluation process. So that's something that the staff and the board, and I'm certainly impacted well owners, are going to want to make sure we see. So with that, that's the end of item 8B3, which is a shallow well impact analysis program. I'll move on to the temporary water use policy. Again, this one bounced around a bit, and we had it listed as staff did for a while as emergency use, temporary use, all kinds of things. We tried to provide details on how you would evaluate it, and consistent with the shallow well program, it was determined to back it up and set it up more as a case-by-case evaluation, a policy to evaluate issues that we brought to the board. Ultimately, this policy was, I'm going to say there were previous drafts and previous documents on this topic that were used, but basically between GA staff council and water district staff council, this policy was developed. So it's in hopes, I hope I'm not getting out of line on this, but in hopes that the water district has reviewed this and is consistent with what the water district wanted to see in this policy. I mention that because one of the temporary uses that brought about this topic was a water use by the water district associated with temporary uses, water delivered for Navy operations. So wanted to make sure we're all on the same page. Anyway, the draft policy, the text, is in the packet, so you have that. Again, this little PowerPoint is taken from that draft text. So I'll just walk through it again. I indicate the issue of groundwater pumping for temporary use has been raised. An example, water districts providing water to China Lake for the improvements work out there. Currently, the way it's set up right now, the replenishment fee, is assessed on all groundwater pumping over the GSP sustainable yield. So there really is no leeway on that, and that's what the authority staff is assigned to enforce. That certainly excludes Navy and de minimis pumping, which are excluded from the replenishment fee. The authority and the staff recognizes that some pumping may not or should not be subject to the replenishment fee and may be eligible for an authority board waiver of the replenishment fee assessments. So that's sort of inherent in putting the policy together. The temporary use of water is basically defined as a temporary endeavor, temporary use with a defined beginning and a defined end. That's the whole idea of being temporary. And as I mentioned in the shallow well mitigation program, issues or requests or claims to be made to the board for a waiver would be done on a case-by-case basis. So the policy would involve a written request to the authority for an authority board waiver of the replenishment fees, provide evidence and documentation on the request. Authority staff will review the request on the supporting evidence and make a recommendation to the board in a staff report. It'll be a draft staff report. Certainly the person making the request will be a part of the staff draft report and will see the draft report before it goes to the board. As I mentioned, authority staff will coordinate with the pumper in preparing the report. The final draft report will be placed on the board agenda for board action. Again, the pumper would have an opportunity to address the board as the staff report is being addressed, and then the authority board action is considered to be final on addressing that waiver of assessments. Last part of the PowerPoint describes, just for information purposes, some of the types of temporary uses that might be considered. First one is just water supplied for temporary use, a leak or unanticipated use of water, emergency use of water, investigative studies or pilot projects. Once again, the Water District had some aquifer performance testing done, certainly could apply. Registered de minimis pumpers providing services to another de minimis pumper or that might be not a de minimis pumper or a situation like that. Plus, I didn't put it down here, but it could be there are certainly other things that may come up. So that's the policy. I didn't mention this regards to the shallow well impact program or the temporary, but I'll do it both together. The intent here is to send these draft policies to the PAC, and we'll do that next week for the PAC review and comments, and then we'll hopefully get comments from the PAC and bring it back to the board with either a final version or revisions for board action. So that concludes the report on the temporary water use policy. So moving on, and I think it's our last item, I believe. Yes. Our last item, yes. Annual report for water year 2021. Heather Steele, who worked very hard on the last annual report, along with G. Moran. Heather's on the line. And Heather, can you walk through the PowerPoint, please?
Yes. Good morning, members of the board. This presentation on the annual report partly was brought up because there seems to be some confusion in the public that we've been hearing about regarding just the timeline and how the annual report works with DWR. So this presentation is intended to clarify that as well. Annual reports are due annually to DWR on April 1st of every year. So we did already submit the 2021 report this past April. The April 2022 report is what we're currently working on, and that will provide data for the previous water year, so water year 2021, which is October 2020 through September 2021. So each report is always reporting on the previous water year. DWR has specified the specific requirements for each annual report, and there's really not that much that is required to be put in it. It's these 4 items that are listed: groundwater levels, change in groundwater and storage, groundwater production, and the total water use, and an update on progress towards implementing the GSP. So each year, as a reminder, in spring and fall, particularly in spring and fall and sometimes in other times, is when this data is collected in the field. And we just completed field work a couple weeks ago in October. We had people out there collecting samples and collecting that data that's going to be used in the following year annual report. So those are the requirements for the annual report, but from internal discussions and just thinking about how best this report can be used to manage the basin, we are going to expand what data is reported in the annual report beyond what those DWR requirements are. And we're intending this expansion for this annual report, and it's probably going to bleed into the next annual report to get it all set up of how we want to report all the data basically that we're going to be obtaining throughout the years, so that the annual reports can be a better tool to show what's happening in the basin. Previous annual reports are posted on the GA website under the homepage under reports. So just to clarify that for people who are wanting to see the previous one. And then for this water year 2021 annual report that we're working on now, which will be submitted this coming April in 2022, We are currently drafting the report, and in the summer it will be in internal draft review. In January, we intend to bring that to the staff for their review, and by end of January, it will be provided to the TAC for their review. In previous years, we have received very valid comments that not enough time was provided to the TAC to do a thorough review of the report. So we are going to remedy that in this year and give plenty of time for those TAC members to provide a thorough review. And in March, we will make a presentation of all that data and everything that goes into the annual report. We'll make that presentation to the board at the March board meeting. And as I said before, April 1 is when they're all submitted to DWR. Those are the requirements. That's it for the annual report. That's the last item we have a presentation for. But Steve did ask me to also comment on just our general schedule of tasks beyond what is in the annual report. So at the request of the PAC, we did prepare a general schedule of tasks, and that was discussed at the last PAC meeting. So I believe Mr. Janis will be discussing that later in his report. That schedule primarily had steps and basin management tasks, and it was intended to be a general schedule. There isn't a lot of detail in it. That's because many of Stetson's tasks are ongoing and as needed. So a detailed schedule isn't always appropriate for those type of tasks. Specific project schedules can also be certainly developed for any individual projects. For example, the recycled water project, we could develop a very specific schedule as we get into implementation. We are still receiving some comments on that from PAC members. Some of those, I believe, are going to be in your board packet already. And we'll address those and see how to best present this schedule. It seems many PAC members are asking for more detail, which, as I said, it's not necessarily always appropriate for all of these tasks. I saw some comments regarding the finances and how we can tie budgets to these tasks too. And that's also another item is discussing budgets coming up and in the financial report. So in the coming weeks, months, I guess we'll be seeing how to merge those together and how best to present that schedule. That's all I have for that, Steve, unless you have anything more to add.
No, I don't, Heather. Thank you. Good report. Thank you. I'll just mention back on the annual report that we have over the last few months we've received some good comments and questions about last year's annual report, and we try to respond to those. And certainly, both the questions and the responses will be included and addressed in this annual report. Heather has those, and Jean has those. Jean's responded. Director Retora has provided some pretty good questions, and we've tried to respond the best we can right now. One thing to keep in mind is that the annual report is kind of a snapshot. At the 5 years, we will go back and rerun the model and relook at some of the provisions of the GSP. That's really the big evaluation. Otherwise, the annual reports are intended to provide information that was acquired that we've developed just from that year and keep moving forward. So with that, I think that's, Mr. Chairman, that's the end of the Water Resource Manager report if we have any questions.
Thanks, Steve. We'll bring back to the board for any questions or comments. Okay.
You wanted the board to comment before public?
I'm going to bring it to the public after.
Okay. Just a couple quick comments. My understanding is that the two documents, the shallow well mitigation program and the policy on temporary use, are going to be released for PAC review, and we're going to have that PAC review before they're submitted or released for approval to the board.
Correct. We will have their review and comments before we bring it to the board for any action.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yep.
Second of all, going to the annual report, the schedule, a couple questions. I'm assuming that the internal draft review means a Stetson internal draft review, or what was the? I mean, it appears it's going to take a month to do, and I'm curious who's reviewing it.
Typically, that review would include our staff would have been done with it by the time it's in draft form. It would be the GA staff, all of the GA staff team, and we have legal and we have general managers, our general manager of the water district, general manager of the authority, the city. Everybody would have a chance as part of the team representing this board. Would like to have their review and input before we send it out to the PAC and the TAC.
Okay, I guess I was actually referring to the December 2021 internal draft review.
Yeah. I got to look to see what's before that, because the intention annual report. That would indicate that by sometime in December, Heather's goal, Heather and Jean, their goal is to have an internal draft for our review internally in the month of December, and that by January it should be available for the GA staff to review.
Okay, I guess, thank you. That does clarify that.
Yeah.
I would like to suggest that the staff, the January 2022 staff review, I look upon the TAC, quite frankly, as part of our staff, and I have probably more confidence if we can get them to spend the time on it, that we're going to get more comments from them than there are any of the agency staff. So I would like to see that combined with a TAC review. I think we'll get more use of that time in terms of reviewing if we put it out to the TAC. We've got very few TAC members the way it is, and I want to encourage them to do as much as they can in the time that they have. And second of all, there's no mention of getting it out to the public, and my feeling is I would like to see something in here about the public review of it. The last couple of years, we've been very lean on reviews at all, and I'd kind of like to make up for it this year and make sure that not only does the TAC have ample time to look at it and provide feedback, but the public can have ample time to look at it and provide feedback. And that somewhere in the schedule, there is time, if there is someone comes up with a change that we can't wait until next year to do, that we can incorporate it this year. And I see no time in this schedule, especially it's going to come before the board on March 9th. So basically there are 3 weeks in March that nothing really can be done. So I'd like to see the schedule modified to get it out to both the TAC and the public sooner. And as far as I'm concerned, the water district manager, he's got a full-time job doing his job. I don't think he's got time to go through a technical document in nearly the depth that the TAC can. So I'd like to see that either greatly minimized or pulled together with a TAC review.
Sure. I'll just mention, Director Vittora, that the presentation to the board on the 9th, and then submittal to DWR, that part of that 3 weeks would be allowing some time if the board has any changes or anything they want to do to make sure that we get it in a format that we can get it delivered. So it gives staff a little time to make sure the board comments are addressed.
Okay.
And that there will be a copy of it in that presentation, so the public will get that 72 hours before the board meeting. The public will see that in the draft packet, so they'll have a chance, and they can comment at the meeting too. If the board would like us to combine the public with the TAC. I have no problem combining the TAC with the staff review because, as you point out, we only have 3-4 members of the TAC that are really active right now. But it can be quite cumbersome if we send it out to the public and we start getting comments to try to address public comments and try to get this draft prepared in time to submit it to
you know, we're only really concerned about meaningful comments. We're not concerned about every comment that comes in. But my feeling is, and I appreciate your willingness to put board comments included. However, quite frankly, if it hasn't come up out of a TAC review or the public's review before then, I have very little faith that the board is going to come up with a technical comment that's going to require anything other than changing a word here or a word there. So I'd like to see the review as well as the time for correcting heavily weighted toward early so we can get TAC and public input.
Sure. And just so you know, the due date is April 1st, so we're bringing it to the board at the first meeting behind that. We can't bring it to the board any later than that, so right. we don't have a choice there.
Now
we'll have a look at this schedule and see what we can address.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other comment from the board? Okay, let's go ahead and bring it to the public for public comment.
Joshua Nugent again from Mojave Pistachios and Nugent Ranches. And as I'm listening to the section on the Water Resource Manager, you've got Proposition 1, which is, I believe, a Department of Water Resources grant. Proposition 68. I believe the DWR is also interested in the recycled water program, surface water percolation, shallow well mitigation, definitely the annual report. And they're probably also listening right now on the policy on temporary use. So following the public comments, I would, I guess, reiterate, for all of these items that are related to the Department of Water Resource, several of which are contentious and would be probably talked about in a facilitation process. Again, you know, Mr. Peters is supposed to represent us. We're ag. We're in Kern County. I know all the rest of you. I've seen you here a bunch of times. Is anyone willing to give us any answer, any indication, yay or nay, that you guys are willing to participate in the Department of Water Resources facilitation process, especially in the light of the fact that most of our funding is either directly or indirectly involved in the Department of Water Resources? I'm expecting a non-answer, but just to let you know, as a member of the public, a non-answer is a pretty loud answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Don Decker, TAC member representing domestic well owners. I have two brief comments. I think the shallow well mitigation effort that Steve just presented has some significant improvements over previous versions. However, it still fails to recognize the emergency nature of most shallow well failures for their owners. And I realize that's a difficult aspect to try to address, but it's a very real thing for the failed well owner. In fact, in some cases it represents what amounts to a disaster. And 90 days, for example, to prepare a staff report is far, far from a response that would be useful to a person like I'm talking about. We are in contact with many of our private well owner associates, and many of them are seeing this effort as it goes forward as primarily an effort to check the box that DWR wants you to check. Yes, indeed, you have a shallow well mitigation program, but they don't see this. It's not just me saying this. They don't see this as a useful component to their problems. The second thing I want to say is I do appreciate, Steve, your putting together a schedule for the review of the annual report. And there are a number of things that absolutely need to be incorporated in this new version compared to last year's report. I did submit a set of comments not long after we actually got copies of the 2020 annual report, and I've never received any responses. I'm just making that comment for you. I'm going to resubmit that report that I gave to you guys on the off chance that somehow it slipped through the cracks. I know in talking with Gene it hasn't, but I'm going to do it in a formal way here. There are aspects to that report that are very misleading that need to be corrected. So that's really what I want to tell you guys, and look forward to this next annual report and the improvements that it'll incorporate. And I do beg you to think more seriously about the emergency aspect of the private well failure. It's a very real problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Decker.
Nick Panzer, Ridgecrest resident. A couple of comments. First on 8B3, the shallow well mitigation. The question is, can a claimant register as well right up to and just before filing his claim? Or is there some past deadline that we've already passed, perhaps, that they had a chance to register and thereby qualify for the plan? I would be much more sympathetic concerning Don Decker's comment about the urgency of a failure if someone had registered their well way back when we asked them to register. But to them to come forward then and register with their left hand and file with their right doesn't feel right to me. Seems to me there might logically be a connection between that space between when they registered their well and when they filed their complaint. Maybe that's how much time the water resource manager gets to answer that. But I am sympathetic for those. So there are some out of 800, as I understand it, domestic well owners, about 120, 130 have actually registered. The rest are just laying out there waiting, I guess, for a failure, and then they'll come forward and register and file their claim. Doesn't feel right to me. The second item has to do with the temporary water use. In an earlier draft of this, there was a statement that I heartily agreed with that said that if a waiver was granted, then the amount of emergency water that was actually used would reduce the amount of the allocation available for the following year, which is very logical, at least to me, because we're necessarily talking about a waiver of water that exceeds someone's allocated amount. And that's when I saw that provision in there, that the $76.50 for allocation next year would be reduced by such water that was waived from the fee. So I hope that ends up in there somehow, that the following year gets adjusted downward in terms of that allocation for any such waivers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Panzer.
Good comments. Yeah.
Wes Castenstein, PAC member. Just a couple brief comments. First, on the shallow well mitigation, I'd like to second Dr. Decker's comments on how urgent it is when someone's well fails. It's happened to two of my neighbors, and I've provided them garden hoses. And please don't water your plants with my water, and let's get it taken care of real quick. And so that is an emergency. It's not comfortable for anybody, and I think that should somehow be addressed in the plan, that there should be a way a person can take action quickly and still be reimbursed. And so I think your timeline might be a little bit slow. Another question on the private well mitigation. There presumably came some point in time when a gun was fired, and the GA now takes responsibility for well failures. So what if the water drops below my pump because it has continued to fall, the water levels continued to fall, and I had to lower my pump? Maybe not a complete well failure, but if the water had not been allowed to drop, I would not have to lower my pump. So is that a cost that a domestic well owner could claim? Just a question. Regarding temporary water use, a couple thoughts. Would someone grading land for a new housing project, would that qualify as temporary water use? That's kind of the tip of an iceberg that's going to bring a lot of ongoing water use when the new homes are built. And in my mind, there's a larger question. Maybe it's a question for the water district, but when growth like that occurs, do all the citizens that use the district water pay for that pay additional fees for the additional water used, or does those additional fees go strictly to the developer and the owner of the new home? So that's kind of a larger question. And if grading land for a new development were to be provided temporary water authorization, I think you're kind of already making a decision, or you're heading in the wrong direction with who pays for that water as time goes forward. And another quick observation on temporary water use. I have a friend who has some wells in the Pearsonville area, and I believe I heard him say that firefighters have used his wells to fill up their trucks and go fight fires up 9 Mile Canyon. And of course, I don't think we would turn that away, but we might want to keep an eye on that kind of a thing. If we end up wholesale providing water to go fight fires somewhere else, we might ask for some kind of those folks who fight the fires to somehow provide us a recompensation for that. And I'm liking the general direction we're moving with the financial tracking. I do think there are needs for some level of detailed planning, maybe not a POAM as we saw it before. Thank you. And I will bring you comments up through the pack.
Thank you, Wes. Okay, we'll take public comment on the, well, let me hold back here just a minute. We have one more public comment on the floor.
Mr. Chair, are you able to hear me?
Hold tight. We have one more public comment.
Okay.
Judy Decker again. I too have concerns about the shallow well mitigation draft and the temporary water use. I believe you need to make it clearer in the document that this is going to be a reimbursement policy. It's not very clear in there. And I will point out that to the board and to Mr. Panzer that when your well goes down, many people don't have storage facilities, or if they do, they don't have very large storage facilities on their property. And so it can be, and usually is, an emergency. I think Mr. Castenstein brought up a valid point about having to lower your well due to the fact that the water level has dropped significantly. There are many people living out in the country who built their houses long ago, put in their wells, and now have been encroached upon by the water district with their 4 new wells along Bowman Road. That needs to be in the back of your head to remember that. The other thing I have about the temporary water use is I'm concerned that this policy is somehow going to infringe upon the temporary water use policy that the water district has, because they do have one. And the issue here is, okay, So we have temporary relief for, in this case, the Navy, and I believe it's their temporary housing they've put in. How long is that going to last? Is it 2 years, 3 years, 10 years? I think that policy, and I'll address it also in the PAC, needs to have some further detail put to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Okay, we'll move to the phone lines. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me? It's Mike Neal.
Yes, we can hear you. Go.
I have a comment. First off, about the recycled water program. This whole issue of the recycled water from the wastewater treatment plant, of course, was initially attempted to be used as a political strong-arm tactic to get both the Water District of Searles Valley to knuckle under to some of the desires of the Groundwater Authority, which they both refused to do. So now we continue forward with the studies and spending all kinds of money looking at stuff that's already been done, studies that have already been completed by the city and partially done over again by the Water District. And basically, we're redoing efforts here, wasting the taxpayers' money, wasting the fees that you're extracting from us. Mostly, we don't want to pay them, but we're forced to. So it's really sad to have to see this kind of duplication of effort and wasted time and wasted money. And there again, also a similar comment about the surface percolation replenishment item on the agenda here. You could have gotten your answer about that, I think, if you had just gone to the local high school science class and asked about 5 or 10 of the students there, hey, is it a good idea to dump water on top of the ground out here and let it finally soak through 100 years later and get to the aquifer? Meanwhile, most of it evaporating into the atmosphere. Of course, you wouldn't have to put all that to them. You'd just ask them if it's a good idea, and they'd have told you what I just said. But yeah, here we are paying our water resources manager firm to look at that. The question is, why? Didn't the majority of the board have enough intelligence all on its own to know that this was a bad idea? And now to the shallow well impact program. Here we are in this very agenda today. You're going to look at a budget of $195,000 for this program, and yet after what is it now, 10 months of extracting mitigation fees from the citizenry, and obviously saying we're collecting almost $200,000 per year from you people, that we have not one single shallow well mitigation has been performed. This is the only thing that the GA might actually be somewhat useful for, and yet they're proving that they can't get going, they can't make progress, they can't get into action for people who very well may have a serious problem on their hands and could have been probably dealt with some kind of crowdfunding effort put on by the local citizens. So we have to have all this money wasted by the GA just because it's a box-checking kind of an effort, and I predict very few people are actually going to get any help from this. So yet, another waste of our money and no help to the people that need to get it. So it's a sad fact, but there it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Next caller. Caller, go ahead.
Hello, this is Renee Westelas, and I'm calling for 2 reasons. I'm also a member of the Policy Advisory Committee. My first issue is the shallow well impact plan. I have deep concerns about not having a more emergency other side plan that's part of that that would address someone's well who may not be able to use their well. You know, if it's less than 90 days and they have impacts to the well and they can't use their water or can't bring up water in their well, I think that needs to be addressed. So I concur with the other commenters on that. And then I have a concern about how to pay for the temporary water use water. I agree with Nick Panzer that maybe the next year's assessment of replenishment fees should be assessed on the amount of water that would have been used in the temporary plan, and then subtract that from the sustainable yield 7650, and only assess the water district customers for the lesser amount the next year to pay for those temporary, because there has to be a way to pay for the temporary water use. There's a lot of people that are on fixed incomes in this valley, and it would be a hardship for them to have to pay more fees, especially when someone else used the water and didn't have to pay for it. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Renee. Do we have any further comments? Okay, seeing none. Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay. We will now move on to item number 9, board review and approval of the 2022 budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will review that for you. First, I want to direct you to the staff report in your packet, because it gives us some of the key points and assumptions that staff used in putting the budget together. And just to review those, you'll see that our total proposed budget, which includes our projected revenues and expenditures from all funds, includes about $3.86 million in expenditures and $5.8 million in revenues. Now, we're going to see that our extraction fee expenses total $2.3 million, and our extraction fee does not bring in that much money, so it will require an interfund transfer of more than $1 million to balance that budget. We're also continuing to address our outstanding debt against the extraction fee, as well as the proper allocation of some pre-2021 invoices, as well as repayment of outstanding advances and obligations to Kern County and the city of Ridgecrest. So we have these outstanding advances budgeted for repayment this year. You'll see, too, that we've included a line for legal fees for general counsel this year, and then any fees that are outside of our general counsel services are going to be allocated to the augmentation fee fund. Let me also just tell you that you'll see that we use the term augmentation fee as opposed to replenishment fee, and we also use we have a shallow well mitigation fund. We don't use the term replenishment fee because that's a collective term. We've heard a lot of comments that we want to see those restricted funds separately accounted for, and so since the replenishment fee includes two different components, an augmentation fee and a shallow well mitigation fee, that's how we split them out in this budget. So where you see augmentation fee, that refers to what folks have previously referred to as replenishment fee, because it's the lion's share of that fee. For budget purposes, our administration costs are split equally between the extraction and replenishment or augmentation fees, because that was the approach used in the current year budget. And if board wants us to do anything differently, that will be at your discretion. You'll also see that the fees from RGS are only a placeholder. We don't have the proposal in place yet or ready for presentation. That'll come to you next month. So any fees that we have in the budget for RGS are just a placeholder, and they'll be subject to adjustment. So with that, let's take a look at the PowerPoint. And so here, this is our annual budget by revenue allocation. You'll see that our total projected revenue is 5.8 million, and you can see how it's allocated with 1.245 million from the extraction fee, approximately 4 million from the augmentation fee, 195,000 in the shallow well mitigation, and then we have some grant money that is projected, Prop 1 SDAC money, as well as from Prop 68. And we have expenses that are in this slide just grouped by broad categories. And I'm sorry. April, are we going through the slides?
The PowerPoint presentation went down, so Gary's working on it. So if you just want to hold off for a minute.
Okay, very good. We'll just back up to the first number slide where it's proposed annual budget by revenue allocation. So you can see that the projected total revenue from all revenue sources is 5.8 million. And this first slide lays it out. The next slide, essentially the same table, but just highlighting the projected total expenses by revenue allocation and by broad expense category, 3.8 million. Next slide. And so here we are showing generally beginning and ending balances, although we don't have beginning balances for the end of 2021 yet. And so as the note here says that our audit for 2020 is in process, and we expect to have beginning balances available after that, as well as the 2021 budget and expenses that we're in the process of allocating by revenue and task to make sure that everything is complete. But what this also shows is revenue, but then also the transfer that will need to be made from the augmentation fund to the extraction fund in order to balance the budget for extraction fund. Next slide. And so here we're just showing our revenue projections for the various fees, starting with the extraction fee. You'll see the actuals for 18, 2019, 2020, and for 2021, you're only showing the actuals through September. Those numbers for October, November, and December will be filled in after the year ends and we have the actual numbers to plug in there. And then here's our 2022 estimate, 1.245 million. Next slide. Next slide shows our revenue projection for the augmentation fee. Again, the lion's share of what's referred to as the replenishment fee. And you'll see that we're estimating approximately $4 million revenue from the augmentation fee. Okay, next slide is the shallow well mitigation fee. Again, our projection of revenue. And again, actual will be filled in once it's actually received by the end of the year. And this includes a portion of that replenishment fee, right? The part that's allocated to shallow well mitigation. It also includes transient pool payments. Here is our revenue from our grants, projected at $338,500. And then a summary of our outstanding obligations. You can see that we have an advance agreement with the County of Kern, $500,000 that needs to be repaid. We have in-kind services from the City of Ridgecrest, approximately $300,000, and that would include attorney services from the city attorney, as well as IT and council chambers charges. Here where you see interfund loans, that's the proposed loan from replenishment or augmentation fund to the extraction fund to balance that budget, that 1.062. And then repayment of advance funds to the water district is actually it's an interfund transfer, and the reason for that is when the water district repaid its own advance at the beginning of this year, its initial advance was used in extraction fees, and they reimbursed themselves out of replenishment fee monies. Now, we do not currently have sufficient funds in the extraction fee to make the replenishment fee whole, so that continues to be an outstanding obligation. We have no postponed invoice payments, so here's this is our summary of outstanding obligations. Next slide shows our proposed obligation repayments, and what we're proposing to repay is the Kern County advance, as well as the City of Ridgecrest in-kind services for a total of $800,000, and that's included in that interfund transfer that we're proposing from the augmentation fee to the extraction fee. Next slide. So here's what the proposed budget looks like when it's balanced with that interfund transfer, and there you can see highlighted under revenue, under second line under extraction fee is the loan from the augmentation fund, $1.606 million to balance the revenue there. And going to the next slide, again, just shows our revenues and expenses, and this is a balanced budget. And we'll go to the last slide there, which shows the total expenses, and then our surplus. And again, this is for 2022. This does not include numbers or any funds rolled over from 2021. This is just budgeted for 2022. This would be the remaining budget as proposed. There's more detail in the report, the budget report that's provided in the packet, but can I provide any information or answer any questions?
Any questions from the board?
Yes, I do have a few. Going back to page 1, I was trying to look at the revenues, and I did see what you have on that was page 1, but then going to page 2 to identify where you got those numbers, when I divide the total cost by 105, which is the dollars per acre, I believe is the correct number, I come up with 11,858 acre feet. And I'm having a hard time trying to figure out how we've got 11,858 acre feet to generate that $1.2 million. And I see your numbers, and quite frankly, you know, it looks like they're a mix of people paying on time and people paying late, and one thing or another. And it seems to me that the true basis for the dollars that are coming in ought to be the number of acre feet pumped. And so, quite frankly, I'd like to see that used as a basis for generating the revenue for the extraction fee.
Well, Director, if you'll look at that extraction fee revenue projection, you'll see that we basically have used the actual from 2021 for our estimate, our projection for 2022.
Yeah, I saw that. And if you look at the numbers, I would have more faith in trying to understand the acre feet. I'm not doubting your numbers. I think that we'd be far better off by looking at it, understanding how much water we pump and using that to generate the numbers. Going to page 3 is the augmentation revenue. And again, your numbers here are, since all the money is coming from the water district, the numbers are probably right on. But they were, again, based upon not this year's production of water, but last year's production of water. And my understanding is that in the reconciliation, we're going to be probably 100 or so acre feet in excess of what we actually pumped. So we'll be asking for 100 acre feet, or about $200,000 back. So all the money that you've got in for 2022, for estimated, most of that will be gone. And quite frankly, I think based upon the fact that there are new laws coming in that we're required to obey, SB 606 and AB, I believe it's 1668 or something like that, we're going to be required to reduce our pumping. So that's another indication that the augmentation fee revenue is most likely high. And then going on to page 4, if I divide the 195,251 by the $17.50 per acre for the shallow well fee, I get 11,157 acres, and I can't come up with anywhere near that number of acres. I'd feel much better if we had some feel for where we're getting that.
Again, these are actual. Their estimates for 2022 are based on actual for 2021.
Well then, okay. If that's what you want to use, I guess that's fine. I would like to see, however, in some type of a reference document, the pumping information. That we're obviously gathering the pumping information, and I would like to see that. And that may have nothing to do with the budget. Maybe go back to our friends from Stetson. There was a discussion on page 1 about a loan from the augmentation fund. Typically when I think of a loan, I think of an interest rate, and I think if the money wasn't going out and for a loan, it would be put in a bank and would be earning interest. or the groundwater authority would have to borrow money. So I think we need to talk about what kind of interest rate is being paid on that money. Okay, on page 5, quite frankly, you went over this and you did address one of my major questions on here, but I didn't understand it. But the whole format, by the way, before I go on, I truly appreciate the changes in format that's been made in terms of readability of the budget. I think this looks much more like an audit to me, and is much clearer. And I think it's good that we can actually talk about the issues based upon the content of the budget rather than the format of the budget. But in this particular page, it seems to me that it would be more understandable, from my viewpoint anyway, as an engineer, not an accountant, of having obligations at the beginning of the year, changes to the obligations during the year, and then obligations at the end of the year, because I wasn't able to follow which was at the beginning of 2021, the end of 2021, the beginning of 2022, or the end of 2022. And in particular, you already mentioned once the repayment of the advanced funds for water district, but you only have $500,000 there, where we actually took credit for $616,083.
Yeah.
So I guess
Director,
that's a separate and distinct issue from the start and then what happened and then the end. So I'm not sure what you can do.
Director, let me just tell you that additional $115,000 was attributed to the augmentation fee, and that's why you don't see it there. It's only $500,000 that was spent from the extraction fee that needs to be made up from the extraction fee back to the augmentation fund. The 115 has already been addressed.
The 115,000 was an advance from the water district, just like the $500,000 was. So I don't see any reason for handling them different.
Because it was for expenditures that were allocated to the replenishment fee, so you don't see it as an obligation for their extraction fee to pay back to their augmentation fund. This has nothing to do with actual payments to the district. These are interfund transfers.
I guess in my mind, the advance was from the water district to the groundwater authority, and I want to make sure that every dollar of that gets used for the water district's payment of our fees, and we could maybe have a chat offline to make sure that's going to happen.
Director, the water district reimbursed itself from the replenishment fee, from the augmentation fund. 500,000 of the 615 that it withheld, that it reimbursed itself with, was used in the extraction fund, and that's where it needs to be repaid. That's why it's being shown as an outstanding obligation. The other 115 were expenditures that were advanced by the water district for costs that were attributed to the replenishment fee or the augmentation fund. That's why you don't see them addressed. They've already been attributed and they're already accounted for. It's not an outstanding obligation.
Okay, I want to make sure that the water district is getting credit properly. So I think we need to move on. On page 6, you show under administration the breakout of the administrative fee, half to the extraction fee and half to the augmentation fee. The augmentation fee is only 1 out of 5 of the funds. I don't see, and bottom line on it is that the administration cost should be divvied up as actually used. That is, I doubt whether or not half of the time spent in administration is going to the augmentation fee. There's really very little except for what Capital Corps is doing that requires any type of administrative costs. And the same comment would go for the external audit. Appreciate the fact that the augmentation fee is where the money is, and so there's a large temptation to say, hey, let's just take it out of there. But got to remember that it's only one fund, and it doesn't really require a lot of audit work because there's almost no finance in events happening. So I would like to see the external audit also revisited. And now going on to page, well, it should be 7, I think, but, 1 and 3, okay, going to okay, apparently page 6. It's called page 6. I've lost the next page anyway. You have under other legal services $500,000 for legal services. Actually, if you look back at the increase in the extraction fee, when we took it from $30,000 to $105,000, one of the costs in that was funded was increasing the legal services from $200,000 to $647,000. So there's no need. So it should continue to be in the extraction fee. The lobbying services on the line below it for $175,000. Admittedly, that Capital Corps is, I think, one of our critical partners, and they are doing the lobbying. I don't know who else is doing lobbying, and certainly the water importation is one of the large lobbying issues, but it's not the only lobbying we do. So some of that 175 needs to be moved over to, the only thing else that's available, quite frankly, is extraction. And then on page 3 of 3, there is a charge for on line 65. I guess that might be the easiest way to describe it. There is a fee for recycled water for $180,000. The augmentation fee is for imported water, or anything to do with imported water, I suppose. But if you look at the 2 lines above it, where we're actually dealing with imported water, there's a $35,000 charge and a $118 charge, but we're $1,000 charge, which together are $153,000, which means that the total money spent on the imported water is less than recycled water. My understanding, when this group voted for the recycled water, that money was coming out of grant money, which means that grant money would be going into the extraction fee. So I'd like to see the $180K moved into the extraction, because it's not imported water. On page 1 of 5, the next page, I believe, it would be nice if indeed your software permitted to have a subtotal for each one of the administration, non-department, basin, all those various groupings. And then the one thing I'd like to bring your attention to at the bottom of page 1 of 5, there's a $30,000 charge for annual report preparation. And it seems to me that the annual report is one of the most important reports that we put out between the updates and the GSP. I'm not sure how you can get that job done on $30,000. So I guess my feeling is that's an area where we should consider maybe increasing. We've maybe gotten by in past years when there was no review of the document and no updates. My feeling is that it might justify more than $30,000. Okay, and then I think the following pages are 3 of 5 on the budget by fund, 2 or 3 pages later. Again, there's the administrative costs under the augmentation fund that I don't think is right, and the legal services for $500,000, and recycled water. Those are just repeats in a different form, but I still have the same objection to using imported water for fees for anything other than imported water. And let me see, that would be all. Thank you.
Okay, so let me first make a few points and then ask for board direction. The admin costs, and I think I pointed this out in the staff report, admin costs have been split basically 50-50 among the extraction and augmentation funds. That's how it was done in the 2021 budget, and it was approved by the board to be done that way. If the board wants us to do anything differently, then I guess we would seek your direction there. Legal counsel has advised us to budget $500,000 in the augmentation fund for those litigation costs that are basically related to augmentation fund or replenishment fee challenges. We have normally kept our lobbying costs under the replenishment or augmentation fund. Also, we would want direction. It's our understanding that recycled water is part of basin augmentation, and that that's where it belongs. But again, we're looking for board direction to make these changes because this is otherwise what we have in here is consistent with the direction we previously received.
Chairman, if I may, this is Phil Hall. There's some legal issues with the funding. The funding, I don't want to say problems because they're not a problem that Mr. Atora has brought up. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
So to begin with, I've got a general question. So it goes back to the very beginning. Mr. Atora, you had talked of paying loan interest rates. Is the water district really now seeking to pay interest to the county for the $500,000 the county loaned the GA for the general administration costs in developing the GSP back in 2017?
I think those were separate loans that I think were understood to begin with. We're not going to be given any interest. If indeed the county had wanted interest on their money, They should have spoken up at that point in time and asked for it. I see this as being a separate and distinct issue where this could get out of hand very quickly. Over $1 million, and that's assuming that the revenue that we're assuming is going to come in, and my feeling is that revenue is probably at least $300,000 or $400,000 short. But what I don't want to do is this year set a precedent for money being borrowed from a fund that is intended to pay for Table A entitlement to become a fund that we borrow money for because we can't use it for anything else. So, a long-winded explanation, but no, I have no intention of attempting to get the county interest on that funding.
Well, I think I understand your point then, but since how the water district is the primary payer of the extraction fee, wouldn't the water district be paying interest to itself? I guess something to think about.
The interest should be paid to the augmentation fund, not from the augmentation fund. The interest should be coming from the only unrestricted fund we have, which is the extraction fund. And quite frankly, it is the one who is needing of the loan.
That's incorrect. Every one of our funds is a restricted fund. And the water district is the primary payer of the extraction fee. So if we loan from any fund, whether it be the replenishment fee to cover costs now that are extraction or vice versa, the reality is that any interest would really be coming from the water district to itself. But that's another issue for you to think about, and I guess come back at the next meeting or present it in writing, however you'd like us to deal with it. But I do want to make sure that you understand that all of our fees are restricted funds. This agency does not have a general fund budget. It does not have general tax dollars. So that's one. The next thing is you made a claim that the $500,000 in loans, or I shouldn't say loans, $500,000 in expenses that are budgeted for litigation costs should come from the extraction fee, but that's also incorrect. The extraction fee data package, which was put together, over a year ago now by the water district, showed costs for attorney's fees that were part of development of the GSP. We are now in litigation, and our friends at Mojave Pistachio have expressly stated in their first lawsuit, although they've now dropped it as a line in their second amended complaint, that all of the litigation costs by law must come from the replenishment fee. So, and I somewhat agree with them, frankly, that not all of the costs, but the costs in defending that replenishment fee absolutely must come from the replenishment fee. So we can't move it over to the extraction fee. If Mr. Worth has a way of doing that, I welcome his input on that, but that's actually the case. Now, there's some questions about the 50-50 split on general administration. It's more or less a policy choice at some level. You will notice that expenses of, for example, Stetson are itemized and lined out between. They are not general administration. But general administration, like the time in the room that you're in right now, the microphones, the paper that produced this agenda, there are two things in front of this agenda. There's the keeping up a GSP, there's the annual report, there's those things which are related to the GSP. And then for this agency, there's an augmentation aspect. So really, you're doing two things. You are keeping your GSP, as Sigma would say, together. You're reviewing it. You're doing all the things that we're going to have to do for decades now to make sure we've got this basin covered. And then there is the mitigation for the problems of this basin. And those are really split 50-50. So general administration costs I believe should be split that way. The board has chosen that in the past. Water storage districts in the state of California, which frankly, at this point, this GA is very analogous to a water storage district. That's what they do. I know that there has been a lot of talk about this in the past with prior water district board member. You might want to go back and visit those meetings to see that discussion. And that's all I think for now.
All right. In my mind, this is a policy issue, not a legal issue, and we need to decide what we're going to do. There's no doubt in my mind when we went through and revisited the pumping fee, those dollars for budgeting purposes were put in the pumping fee. That's why we went from $30 up to $105. The money should be in the pumping fee. Every time we use money out of the augmentation fee, that puts us further and further away from being able to import water. And I think we've all agreed we need, or at least this board, I've heard members of this board and certainly the city council sitting, we need to import water, we need to import water, and we need to import water. And we need to decide, are we going to spend the money that we need to import water on imported water, or are we going to spend it in other areas that it doesn't need to be spent? Thank you.
Chairman Heyman, if I may again,
go ahead.
The point is being missed here. In December of 2020, when me and Keith and any other legal member was working on responses to comments to the GSP, that is a cost for the extraction fee. The extraction fee was for development and ongoing costs related to the GSP. We now have something that is challenging the replenishment fee. So when I'm working, or when Keith is working, or when Stetson is working on something related to the replenishment fee, it has to be paid for by the replenishment fee. That's not a policy choice. That's a pure legal demand of the board. If Mr. Attora's counsel, Mr. Worth, can present something showing differently, I would be welcome to see it, but I'm sure he won't. I've been doing this for 20 years on fees. I'm sure these funds are restricted. I'm sure the way they are being restricted, and it's really disconcerting to see a board member who is not comprehending that we have to have fees accounted for and our tasks paid for accordingly to what we're doing. I cannot be working on something for the replenishment fee and charging the extraction fee. That's not appropriate. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, we will open up to public comment.
Joshua Nugent, Mojave Pistachios. I hope you guys give me a little bit of leeway since I was just attacked by county council, so I hope my response is given a little bit of time as well. I appreciate Director Ratora trying to give a good faith effort. Would have been nice to maybe see a response back from Mr. Peters versus your legal counsel. So, little history lesson. Let's go back to 2018 when you guys passed the original extraction fee at $30. This is from the July 19th, 2018 Groundwater Authority packet. It says that the fee, which was going to be for $930,000, is estimated to be between 15 and 21 months, but could be reduced or extended depending on the actual groundwater pumping recorded. It also says here that after the GSP is adopted in 2020, the Groundwater Authority will likely be required to implement fees to pay the cost of implementing the management measures proposed by the GSP. It also states in here that if the pumping falls short above, or as has happened, the cost is re-examined, a public process and meeting would be required to increase the fee, which is what happened. In June of 2020, the board passed through this revised groundwater extraction fee data packet, and that 900,000 gap went up to $2 million. And the $2 million was going to be paid at $105 until you got to the $2 million. However, due to some, and you guys say you don't accept the legal inadequacies, but due to proposed legal inadequacies, the board came back and redid that fee in, I think it was December of that year, and that's where we get the resolution that establishes the fee at $105 and also says we're only going to try to collect $1.5 million. So the groundwater extraction fee, which did not require a 218 because it was passed under the water code under Sigma, which said you don't have to do it because it's only for the pre-GSP fees, right? And those numbers have gone up. However, I would love to know how much you've collected so far, because Mojave Pistachios has paid over $600,000. We're at about $650,000. So if the total is supposed to be $1.5 million, we've paid $600,000, and next year on the budget you've got $1.2 to be collected from the extraction fee. My question is, under what authority are you guys extending the groundwater extraction fee past both its time that was stated to the public and the amount? So that's one issue. The second issue is I hope the Water District is aware that they are funding that $500,000 in legal expenses, which I don't know if that interagency or interdepartment, whatever you guys are calling it, transfer or loan is even allowed under Sigma or under your JPA rules, so that would be an interesting thing to examine. But part of that $500,000, I believe, is going to go to sue the Inyo Kern Community Services District. So that's just interesting that the citizens of Ridgecrest are going to be paying fees that are going to then be used to go out and sue the people of Inyo Kern. So, and then my final thing I'll say is I would really appreciate an answer on whether we're going to be a part of the facilitation process. As you can see, based off of this exchange that was involved here, it might be nice to have someone from the outside with a cool head come in and instead of having legal counsel respond to board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Chairman Heyman, if I may again,
Yes.
I'm not sure what exactly I did to attack Mojave Pistachio. Didn't name Mr. Dugin at all, I don't believe, but what I did was I quoted his first complaint he's named on, verified complaint, that said we were misusing extraction fee funds by using it to pay for the litigation that he had against the replenishment fee. It's a direct quote from the litigation. I don't know that I completely agree with that analysis. I'm not going to discuss that here, whether we do or don't, but I don't think it's, how shall I say this? I don't think it's unheard of or incompletely correct. I believe that that's a valid way of looking at this and a valid way of addressing this, a valid way of looking at Sigma's funding options that this agency has, which is why the litigation costs related to Mojave Pistachio's lawsuits, Searles Valley's lawsuits, and the general groundwater adjudication are budgeted in the replenishment fee. Thank you.
I'd just like to respond back again, and not to get into a tit for tat with the legal counsel, but I just hope DWR is listening, I hope the appeals court's listening, and I hope they hear that we're here trying to ask for answers, and all we get are not attacks, I understand, but lengthy discussions from the legal counsel directed at us, and then we get a limited time to respond. So I just want to let you guys know that's where the frustration comes from. We don't get answers, and we get what feels like attacks. Thanks.
Nick Panzer, Ridgecrest resident. The outstanding, well, first let me compliment Carol and the Regional Government Services for the work they've done this past month. It was a huge leap from where we were then to now in terms of the quality and quantity of the data provided for analysis. I appreciated it very much, and I look forward to future improvements. You're very close to the final piece, which is a balance sheet presentation in fund format that shows the various restricted funds in the equity section and their balance. Which leads me to my next comment. When I receive, as an interested party, the packet for the GA meetings, my computer formats them, in this particular case, pages 1 to 102. There was no numbers on any of these pages. So when Stan refers to, well, let's look at page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I kind of can guess what he's talking about because I know the subject he's talking about. But I'm letting you know that when I make my comments now, they're going to refer to a particular page number in relation to 102 because that's the only way I get it. So let me start there. On page 48 of 102 shows the outstanding obligations. That was up here a minute ago. We don't need to bring it back up. But it shows an obligation to the augmentation fee of $1.6 million. And my question is, why isn't there something in this budget that shows when and where the money will come from to repay that obligation? I see nothing there. At the end of next year, 2022, if everything goes according to budget, there would be an outstanding obligation of $1.6 million. It tells me that fees need to be raised somewhere, whether it's the augmentation fee, the extraction fee. We're clearly short. And it's equally clear that the extraction fund and a restricted fund is clearly spending more than it's taking in. But somewhere, more money has to be raised because we have obligations at the end of next year for which no provision has been made for who, when, where, or how the monies will be raised to pay that. Further to the augmentation fund, there's a schedule in there at pages 50 of 102 and 54 of 102. We've covered pretty well, or it's been discussed, the $500,000 legal item, whether that's appropriate to the augmentation. May I have a few extra minutes to get through this? I'll sit down if my time's up.
Try to wrap it up as quick as you can.
Okay. At any rate, I had brought the public announcement for the June meeting of that arranged for the augmentation fee, and it only mentions water purchase costs, imported water purchase, funds to be used only for provided purposes, Q&A, purchase of import costs. There's no mention of conservation, engineering analysis, or recycles, and all of those, including the legal, add up to over $800,000 that are coming out of the augmentation fund. Right or wrong, Mr. Hall, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. But what is clear to me is that we are underfunding, and someone has to step up to the plate and raise either that extraction fee or the augmentation fee, one or the other. And I will leave that at that. Thank you for the extra time.
Thank you, Nick.
Judy Decker again. I will note that one of the things that you should have had in your board package was the PAC report, which suggested you have less formal meetings, and that includes time limits. There's a whole sum total of 5 members of the public here today. But what I wanted to ask, and I guess my question goes to you, Carol, if you're still there.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. At the end of the year, how much money do you estimate we will have in revenues in the augmentation fee?
And I sort of addressed this earlier.
Just give me a number.
What I can tell you is from the 2022 budget, we anticipate having $1.8 million.
In the augmentation fee?
For 2022. We don't have those numbers yet for the end of this year.
The Water District has paid by the end of this year $4.2 million in replenishment fees, most of that should be in the augmentation fee, correct?
Sure. And if you look at the,
I don't have it with me. I can't.
Okay.
Sorry.
So yes, there's for 2022. Again, we're looking at going forward. We're not looking at 2021. We're not looking at this year, but going forward, because that's the topic that we're on. We're looking to collect approximately $4 million from the augmentation fee, and approximately $1 million of that is going to be loaned to cover expenses in the extraction fee, including $800,000 of that million is to repay our debt to the city and to the county.
Well, I would like to restate that I support the sentences that Stan Rotora offered up regarding the augmentation fee. The money is to be used for water importation, purchase of water rights. If we use that money for other things during the year, both this year and last year, we're frittering it away on other things. And when the opportunity arises, that Capitol Corps has been working for us to achieve imported water rights. If we don't have the money, we won't be able to purchase those water rights again. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Okay, we're going to move to the phone lines for public comment. Caller, go ahead.
Hello, this is Renee Westelusk. I just have two quick questions I need clarification on. One is, how much of the $500,000 loan from the water district has been credited back to the water district by the water district not paying the full amount of replenishment fee? Because from my understanding, this started a while back. And then my second question is, this is mainly information to clear up any doubt in the public's mind. Where is the money that is being collected going for the replenishment fee and for the extraction fee? Is it in bank accounts that are under the Groundwater Authority's jurisdiction? Because we had, unfortunately, a member of the Water Board a few weeks back claiming that the money that was being collected for the replenishment fee and I believe the extraction fee, like they didn't know where it was going, like the money had disappeared. And I don't want the public thinking that this money has disappeared or what, is being hidden somewhere. So I'd appreciate if you could please clarify those for me. Thank you.
Okay, Renee, sure. First on the water district question, the water district has repaid itself all of its advance. What it did was, rather than making payments initially at the beginning of this year, it reimbursed itself from those payments. So all of its $500,000 plus all of its additional $115,000 has been repaid to the water district. Now we're just talking about having to make the replenishment or the augmentation fund whole, because the monies should have come from extraction fees. And so we have to build up enough money in the extraction fee to be able to transfer it back to the replenishment fee or the augmentation fee to make that fund whole for that transfer. But as far as the water district has been completely repaid. As far as where our money is held, Kern County is our treasurer. Now, so money that we receive gets initially deposited at Mission Bank, but then it goes to Kern County, and it is held by the Kern County Treasury.
Okay, well, thank you for that information, and I'm glad you're clarifying for the public, because I don't want the public thinking that money has disappeared. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Renee. We'll move on.
Chairman Heyman, if I might add something for a quick moment.
Go ahead.
The use of the term treasurer is a legal term in this instance with the county. You know, I'm sure we've all been involved in things, you know, whether it be kids baseball or soccer or something where a parent is a treasurer and they maintain the funds and they account for the funds. When we talk about the county as the treasurer in this instance, it's really nothing more than a bank account like Bank of America. So I don't want to get a false impression on that. One other thing that I do want to bring up, because it seems that we have a collective memory loss. The extraction fee was always set out with the concept and the full knowledge that it was going to be not enough to meet the needs at the immediate time, that it was going to be a debt, that we were going to be working in debt, and that it would be paid out in these months that we're currently in because we weren't charging at the number we started. If you might recall, the original $30 was actually proposed by staff to be $60. It worked its way down to $30 on, frankly, Stetson holding back some of its billing to be paid in the rears, frankly. The county and the water district putting money in. There was a point in time, in fact, I can say that the water district staff's first proposal was to stretch that extraction fee into 2022. That was shot down by other staff, but that is why we are still paying for GSP development costs and related costs to the GSP development, along with the other items that the extraction fee has to cover, dealing with annual report, administrative costs for this year, because we are still making up that funds. That's what happened when we underfunded it. There was a desire to underfund it. It was a policy choice, and that's where we're at. So I don't think we should forget that that policy choice happened. It was well acknowledged by the public that supported it, and the water district and others, that we underfunded that fee with the full idea that it would be paid over a longer period of time to backfill. That this isn't new knowledge. This was prime knowledge and out as public as could be when this was done. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next caller.
The number we start. If you might recall, the original
caller, go ahead.
Proposed by staff to be
Thank you.
way down to 30.
Hello.
Yes, caller, go ahead and identify yourself and go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mike Sanat. I think what I'm hearing on the questions about where the fees are coming from in the budget that you're showing, they have a thing called gross scheduled income. And I think it would be really helpful if you showed the categories of income that you're anticipating from each pumper, in this case, the water district, Mojave Pistachios, Sills Valley Minerals, as what you're anticipating based on the structure of the augmentation fees and what's actually being paid. Obviously, if you're not getting what you're anticipating, at some point that becomes a loss, and you know it. So I think people want clarity on where this money that they're paying, and I noticed the water district has changed their billing from IWGA fee to pump fee, and that's not an augmentation fee. That's a pump. As I understand it, the initial extraction fee. So some of this is terminology, and some of it is just people wanting to know, what are we paying for, and where's that money going? With regards to the water treatment facility, and this is where there's a real issue, and that's the money that the
Groundwater Authority wants to pay the city of Ridgecrest to build their tertiary treatment facility. So some of the money that you're paying into the augmentation fee is now going to be used to buy treated water from the city. And in effect, you're paying to treat your wastewater through the augmentation fee. I hope that clarifies some of the confusion about where the money's coming from. That would be you and the city of Ridgecrest and the residents of the city of Ridgecrest. The money then goes to the Groundwater Authority after it's passed through your water district bill. It's very simple. The water district is the collection agent for the Groundwater Authority for money that you're going to be using to buy water in the future. Some of that water will be treated sewage water, and that will be a revenue source for the city of Ridgecrest. So that's how they're going to finance some of the project. So you're looking at a round robin of money. And what Mr. Hall is describing as being a lack of awareness or forgetfulness or something is really just money changing hands and how it's handled.
Okay, Mr.
But
Snott,
for
you're
the
going to have to.
people that are listening.
You're going to have to wind her down. All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Do we have any other callers? Okay, seeing none, we will bring it back to the board for a motion.
The motion would be to accept the draft budget as staff has presented, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and I'll make that motion.
Second.
Chairman Heyman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Rotora,
No.
Director Peters,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Okay, moving on to item number 10, the general manager's report.
Okay.
Carol,
thank
this will be you again.
Yep. So the first item is the financial statement, and this is again, we felt that there was a lot of questions from what we presented last month. And last month we were really just trying to give everyone a picture of how our money was allocated and along with expenditures among the different funds. So what we've tried to do this month is take the same format that was developed for the budget and put our current revenues and expenses into it. So hopefully, and we're also showing you compared to budget, so budget to actual, which hopefully you'll find helpful. And otherwise, I think it pretty well speaks for itself, but happy to answer questions if I can. But this is just for you to receive and file.
Any questions from the board? Okay.
I'm sorry,
We're on item number 10, a monthly financial report with the general manager.
okay, I was having trouble hearing her. Yes, I do have a couple comments. First of all, I want to thank you for changing the format the way you have. I think it's consistent with the actual standard accounting methods, and I think that it actually allows us to show, where the money is really going, which is a big benefit. I don't think anybody ever on the water district implied that the money just disappeared. It matter of fact, we just didn't know where it was going. Obviously, it was going somewhere. The question, two comments. First of all, the sample or example that you showed me or sent to me of MIP report, they actually showed, instead of the end of year budget and percentage remaining, they showed the estimate to complete, or no, it wasn't estimate. It was year end, I think. No, year. Anyway, the approximate estimate of where we should be spending in that year, rather than the remaining. And I think it's just a matter of no, that wouldn't do it either. I think if you go back and look at the example that you showed me, it shows the estimated budget at that month, and that I think would be an improvement. The other thing, not to open up a sore wound, but there are legal services for $265,000 that I don't think should belong, and there's recycled water fees, and again, there's absolutely nothing that went out in the notice for the replenishment fee that had or talked about recycled water. And as a matter of fact, the replenishment fee engineering report specifically excluded recycled water from involvement in that. So those would be my comments. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Okay, we'll open to public comment.
This is Joshua Nugent again from Mojave Pistachios. And I was wondering, since Carol's on the phone, if we had a either year-to-date or total amount of extraction fee that's been collected so far. The 105 and 30.
Should be right up there. Sure, extraction fee shows $981,512 collected through September. That's what this statement shows.
Okay, so just to go back to the history that I'm pretty sure I got correct. So this is from the most recent Ordinance 5-20, amending Ordinance 218, dated September 17th, 2020. So the fee is intended to generate $1.522384 in approximately 28 months to finance the estimated cost to develop the GSP. So irregardless of the timing issue, if we're already at $900,000, and the total fee that's allowed to be collected without doing a new 218 and doing a new fee, which is the answer, frankly, is a correct fee to run the thing going forward. If we're already at $900,000 and the fee is limited by your own resolution to $1.531950 million, $1,531,000, how can we have a budgeted amount to be collected next year of $1.2 million? It seems to me that you guys have gone beyond your own resolution and your own authority and are continuing a fee that's going to be illegal once you go past that $1.5 million. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't try to collect money. I'm saying you should try to go through the proper procedures, do a 218, and do a true fee that reflects the true costs of running this agency. And the last thing I'll say is, remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg. The $2,000 just hypothetically is supposed to get you water, usually in the Delta. So you have to get it down here. You have to build the infrastructure, which is $100 to $300 million, depending on different, estimates that you guys yourselves have done in the GSP. So I guess this is where I'm having a little bit of an incongruity, is we're acting like we can continue this extraction fee in perpetuity when your own resolution limits it, not just in time, but in total amount to be collected. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment from the floor? Okay, we'll go to the phones for any public comment on item 10A. Okay, seeing none. Carol, we're going to move on to item number B.
Very good. So we have a report in our packet, a lengthy report from Capitol Corps, and I'm hoping Jeff Simonetti is still with us. You are still here, right, Jeff?
Yes, I am here.
So I am hoping, because I know you will do this report much more justice than I will. Would you mind running through that for me?
Sure. So good afternoon, everyone. We have, as we mentioned, a lengthy report here. So just wanted to show a couple of highlights. We'll start with the federal items. So we had a very good set of discussions over the last few weeks here on the federal side, and we actually posted the agenda was posted about 24 hours before the infrastructure bill was passed. So we had it there, as you saw, there was a couple of pending items on the federal infrastructure bill, but the good news on the federal side is that passed, and there are some pretty significant potential funding opportunities that we won't go into significant detail at this point on related to that, but we'll be bringing those back at the next board meeting to discuss further. The specific thing that we do want to talk about today is pertaining to the Department of Water Resources funding plan. And if you go, there are two items, and it's get you the exact page number where it starts in the packet. On page 69 on the board packet, where we have a memo. It's called Department of Water Resources Sustainable Groundwater Management Act Implementation Program. And then directly after that, there's a letter. That's what I want to be talking about specifically here. So, as we've mentioned in the past, Senate Bill 170, the California Senate Bill 170, which pertained to the budget, put a significant amount of money towards water programs and water infrastructure programs. Through that, the Department of Water Resources received $180 million that is geared towards helping and assisting with Sustainable Groundwater Management Act projects for critically overdrafted groundwater basins. Through that, the basin is eligible to receive, through that program, $7.6 million in funding. So that is very good news coming from the state in terms of where our eligibility is. There are a couple of key components here in terms of next steps. The PSP, which is basically the governing document for how that process is going to take place, is out for review right now. And we have and it needs comments back by no later than November 29th. We'll get into the specifics of that comment letter, but we have a couple of areas that we want to ask your thoughts on and to see if we can draft that letter. Once that we get through that comment period, then there will be round one funding, which is going to be taking place and has to be submitted no later than January 31st of 2022. So if you see, and again, this is specifically discussed on page 72 of the packet there, where it says the application process has 3 steps. So the Groundwater Authority will have to submit a spending plan of at least $10 million to the grant program staff to review and rank. Then that has to be submitted by no later than January 31st of 2022. They'll review that, and then we will get into contractual discussions with them at that point regarding that. The wastewater recycling facility, as well as the interconnection project, are eligible infrastructure items for these. And it would be our recommendation that those are the areas that we focus on in terms of projects that would be eligible for that. The other good news is that this is the way that DWR is focusing this specific set of monies is that they're splitting it up to $7.6 million per basin. Now, as you may know, there are lots of critically overdrafted groundwater basins that have multiple groundwater sustainability agencies within a particular basin. And for those basins, they would have to decide collectively between each one of those GSAs what would be project priorities. But in this instance, since we are the only GSA for the basin, we have complete authority as to where that funding application could go to. So that, again, is that funding process is due January 31st of 2022. So we've got a bit of time on that, and we'll be working with Stetson. The immediate requirement is the comment letter that we've put together as a draft. And again, that begins on page 76 of the packet. And so when we spoke with Kelly List at the Department of Water Resources, and when we talked about project eligibility there, she recommended that we provide comments and thoughts back on the process. And so we've put this draft letter together. It has a couple of components here. I'll walk through those one by one. The first comment here is that there's a carve out related to critically overdrafted groundwater basins and there's a component there that ties into specific components within the San Joaquin Valley, and it's not clear within the guidance whether critically overdrafted groundwater basins outside of the valley would be subject to that as well. So here, comment 1 there on page 77 states that we just clarify to say that since we are outside of the San Joaquin Valley, that would not apply, those specific comments would not apply to us. The second comment here is saying about, and again, it's on the bottom of page 79, which talks about remaining or unawarded funding eligibility. So what they're saying is that money would, if there's unallocated funding, that would just go back into a general pool. What we're recommending is, since this money was initially allocated for critically overdrafted groundwater basins, if there's more money beyond that was not allocated, that should stay within the critical overdrafted groundwater basin pool, so that there's a possibility that if there's any money left over, we might be able to get more funding beyond that. Then finally, the comment is comment 3 at the end of the letter there. We are recommending that they keep, and Kelly specifically made mention to say, not only give us comments on things that you would change, but things that you would like to keep the same. So this final comment here talks about maintaining equitable funding strategy among the critically overdrafted groundwater basins. As the PSP is stated right now, like I mentioned, each critically overdrafted groundwater basin would be eligible for $7.6 million. We think that that's a good opportunity to make sure that everyone keeps that equitability. Our concern would be that if they change those draft guidelines, then it would go through a competitive process, and there could be essentially politics played, that some basins may get more than others. And so we think that it's pertinent and worthwhile to make mention that we are supportive of the process as it is, to be able to, like I said, to ensure that we'd be getting that $7.6 million and not have to go through the competitive process. So those are the 3 main components of that letter. So again, like I said, good news on the funding eligibility there. And so what we are seeking is direction right now on that draft letter and your support on that. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Jeff. Any comments from the board? Seeing none, we'll open to public comment. Do we have any public comment from the floor? Seeing none, how about public comment on the phones? And we have none there, so we'll bring it back to the board for direction. I'm in approval of moving Capital Cole forward on this letter, so Director Rotora? Are you in favor of giving direction to Capcor on moving forward with this letter?
If we can get free money, we ought to go for it.
Okay. Agreed. Dr. Peters? Director Ittmeyer?
Yes.
And Director Vallejo?
Yes.
Okay, Jeff, I think you have our direction on moving forward on this letter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
as
sir.
I mentioned, we'll keep working with Stetson and on the draft application as well, and that'll be due in January.
Perfect. We appreciate all your hard work, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
We have 20 minutes. Should I announce to the board so everybody kind of knows what we're... So I'm being informed if the meeting goes, we have 20 minutes. We have about 20 minutes, and at which time, if the meeting is still moving forward, we will need to take a break for IT to do a refresh on, I think, on the video, on the YouTube channel. So just so everybody knows, that's kind of what we're doing. We can do this, is what I'm hearing. So let's move right ahead. All right, so moving on to item number 10C, update on Wolf Hansen.
Thanks, and thank you, Jeff Simonetti, for that great report. You guys are really doing a lot for us, working on getting us some grant money, so appreciate that. For item C, we have an update from Wolf Hansen on our bond efforts, and I believe Roy Nelson is there with you, and he has a brief presentation just to give some background on the bond conditions right now.
Hi.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, everybody. Roy Nelson, Wolf Hansen Company. Hopefully you have a copy of the presentation. I know you're under a time constraint, so I promise I will not necessarily go through this page by page. I will be back next month. I can expand on it more than in that. But basically what the purpose of this was to point out to you our belief and our little bit of our early rationale about what is the best approach for the Groundwater Authority as it's looking at the acquisition of the water rights. And obviously, as part of that, we wanted to address some of the information that had been contained in a September 13th staff report presented to the district. And it had to do with, and in general, it looks at how you finance a long-term asset. And obviously from both the credit agency standpoint as well as the investor standpoint, it is more favorably looked at to finance a capital project or a project in some manner that appropriates the useful life of that asset. The water rights are obviously a long-term asset, and as such, it makes sense to finance them over a longer term. It accomplishes two things by doing that. It matches the financing to the life of the asset, but more importantly, it doesn't place an undue burden on current users compared to future users. In other words, the current replenishment fee or augmentation fee is maybe the more correct term I'm hearing today, has about $4 million coming from the district over a 5-year period. That places a burden on the district as far as the credit agencies are concerned, in that while that is not a bonded debt, it is still a debt that will need to come out of fees collected from the users. So As a result, by financing the water rights over 20, 25, 30, 40 years, it will drop significantly the amount of revenues that needs to come from users over that period of time. That is much more favorably looked at by credit agencies and investors, in that it will take the immediate burden off of them and stretch it over a longer time. So that's the rationale in terms of why, in our opinion, it makes not only credit sense, but economic sense to take and finance a project over a longer period of time. The second consideration in looking at doing bond financing, which raises the money up front for purchasing the water rights, is it puts the Groundwater Authority in a much better negotiating standpoint. It's one thing to go to sellers of water rights and say, we have $1 million or $2 million or $4 million to purchase some water rights. There is a different view when you go to someone and say, I have $25 million to purchase water rights. First of all, it opens up an entirely different pool of sellers of water rights. It also potentially can afford you the ability to get a better price, because if somebody knows I can sell a significant amount of my excess water rights right now for a price, they may be more willing to do that than doing it over time. That's why another reason we believe getting the money up front to collect the water rights will be looked at much more favorably, not only to the potential sellers, but to the credit agencies. And I know I'm sort of going through this and probably driving April nuts because I'm not necessarily going slide by slide, but in terms of why to do the financing now, and April, if you sort of skip to the charts at the end, there you go, one back. That gives you an idea of the interest rates since 2016. 2016 being on the left, current year being on the right. As you can see, while we may not be at the absolute bottom as far as interest rates are concerned, we are certainly darn close to them. The other thing is the feds have indicated that somewhere around the middle to probably the third quarter of 22, they are going to curtail their open market purchases. They are also going to likely allow interest rates to start to float up. So that means somewhere around the end of 2022, you're going to see interest rates likely higher than they are now, and they will continue likely to rise into 23 and until the monetary factors change as far as the feds are concerned. Last but not least, and this will be the last slide, April, the last slide is an indication of how the yields on municipal bonds are. It shows from 1 year out to 30 years, I believe it is. And you can see once you get to about year 8, from 8 to 30, it's a very narrow trading range, very little change between what interest rates are years 8 and 30 compared to what they are from years 1 to 8. Therefore, you're better off taking advantage of that, what we call a flat yield curve, to stretch the debt out for a longer term when the differential in interest rates between doing something, say 10 years, 15 years versus 30, 40 years is somewhat de minimis in terms of the actual interest rate cost. So I can certainly, and I will go into much more detail next month when you may not be under the time constraint, but this gives you a little idea of our thinking and how we're sort of projecting this. There is one more slide, which is sort of a timeline. We know the goal of the authority is to try and get these water rights purchased as soon as possible, prudently. We have a schedule that calls for it being a financing closing the end of February. There may be a little way to accelerate that. We are currently out on your behalf with a request for proposal for bond placement agents and underwriters. That will be the formal approval we bring back to you at the meeting next month. And we will update this both in terms of our thoughts and timing at that time as well.
Any comments from the board?
I do have one small comment.
Sure.
You mentioned the water district in our AA- rating. I thought you'd be interested in knowing, just as a side comment, that in the last month or month and a half, we've been downgraded to A+.
I do know that.
Which is not a major downgrade, I don't think. I think it's still a good...
it's still an outstanding rating.
But yeah. The reason, and you probably can get the report if you haven't
already
got it. It wasn't based upon us borrowing so much as it was the overall, I believe, just the current environment and atmosphere of Sigma combined with the lawsuits that are in the court. So I'll be very interested in seeing how you are progressing next month.
Yeah, and we are fully aware of that. We have read the report as well as the staff report. And we do know that in the staff report, your consultant, one of the items they mentioned was that the rating agencies would not look favorable on a increased debt load by the district at this time. And we feel that probably the rating agencies would look more favorable at a debt financing that extends the obligations of the district under the replenishment fee out 20, 30 years as opposed to 5 years, considering that amount, when extended, will be a significant reduction in the burden your ratepayers would have to pay. That was our thinking. And of course, you don't know that until you get into it, but time will tell, yes.
We'll see.
So,
I just want to add that I think you did a fantastic job in the presentation, and this was very informative. When I read through it earlier, you covered the highlights very well and put it in a manner that I think was really understandable and hit the proper highlights well. And I look forward to hearing back from you in December.
Thank you. Appreciate the
coming
comments.
back at that time. Okay, if we don't have any other further public comments from the board, we will go to comments from the board. We'll move to public comment, and we'll start with the floor since we have somebody coming up to the podium. Nick, go ahead.
Thank you. Nick Panzer, resident of Ridgecrest, customer of the Water District, and a member of the Policy Advisory Committee. I will speak in my own name now as a member of the Policy Advisory Committee, not on behalf of the committee. The timeline chart that was just put up there had an item for January 1, 22, water purchase agreement between Groundwater Authority and Water District finalized. And I'm trying to imagine how, in this environment, what that agreement would look like and how they're going to reach agreement given where we are to date. Given the lawsuits, given the fact, and as I understand it, the district would be on the hook for the borrowing. They would receive the $22 million, say, and give it to the Groundwater Authority. And the Groundwater Authority at that point will have control of those funds. And we've seen already what they can do and how broadly they can stretch Do I have that wrong? Someone's shaking their head. But I'm understanding that it's the water district that will be on the hook. The money will go to the groundwater authority. The groundwater authority will use that money to buy rights, and they will become the owner of those rights, not the water district. That makes me, as a customer of the water district, in effect liable for that debt. And I don't see how they're going to get there in the current environment. I don't think the DWR sees us getting there either. I'm looking at their letter from back in July 16. Indian Wells Valley Basin should re-engage one another to collaboratively develop solutions to the region's groundwater challenges. It goes on to say this will avoid uncertain results. They're concerned about the very uncertainty, as I read this letter, that I understand that the water district is concerned with. There's just too much uncertainty in this environment to move forward with a bond issue, in my opinion. So I can't imagine what that agreement's going to look like. Good luck, Mr. Rotora, in trying to reach agreement with the Groundwater Authority on how this is going to go together. Thank you.
Mr. Panzer, if I might, to alleviate some of your concern, the water district at this point in time has not entertained nor promised or even suggested that the water district be responsible for any type of a debt associated with this.
For support.
We want to see what's going on, understand what the issues are, what the options are, understand the dollars involved, etc. And we certainly do not want to discourage anybody from doing anything. If we can get a good deal, I think that's fine. At this point in time, there is no commitment on the water district's behalf.
Yeah, what's contemplated here is a bond issue by the authority. The authority would issue the bonds. It would be their obligation to repay the bonds. They will own the asset, which is the water rights. The source of that repayment of the bonds would be coming from the replenishment fee, which the understanding is the district is obligated to pay, as well as potentially over time other clients or users of the authority which may benefit from those water rights. So it is not the district that is issuing the bonds, and it's not the district that is on the hook for the repayment. The district's obligation is the payment of that replenishment fee to the authority, and that's the basis of the bond issue.
Thank you. That's very helpful from both of you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Okay, do we have any other public comment from the floor? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the phone lines. Any public comment? Caller, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. This is Joshua Nugent again. Can you hear me?
You're a little bit faint, Josh, but go ahead.
Just better? Can you hear me?
Yep, that's better. Thank you.
Great. So I just wanted to echo some of what Nick Panzer said and remind everyone that this letter from the Department of Water Resources was sent on 7/16/2021 and says that in recognition that local agencies would be faced with challenges such as these, SGMA provides the support role for the DWR, and the Newsom administration has provided DWR with the resources to offer technical, planning, and financial assistance to support local agencies with SGMA implementation. Further down, it says DWR has the resources and stands ready to assist in such a collaborative process. This letter was sent to John Battisti and Catherine Ostapuk at the United States Navy, to Philip Peters as a director at Kern County, and to Scott Heyman, a director of Ridgecrest. On the distribution list also was Carol Thomas Kiefer, the Water District, Don Zadiba, Meadowbrook Dairy, Searles Valley Minerals, and Mojave Pistachios. And I know I've seen letters that many on that list have responded affirmatively to DWR's request for facilitation services. So I'll ask one more time if I could get either a representative from the GA or even any of the individual members to just let the public know, yes or no, do you guys have an intention on participating in the facilitation process? Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Should we go ahead and take one more call? Let's maybe not then. Okay, we're going to have to take a break at this moment, and so we will. About how long are we looking at? Approximately 5 minutes. So okay, so everybody take a break for 5 minutes, and then we will resume. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to now resume. We left off at item number 10C, and we were getting ready to take public comment on the line. So we will resume with that. So caller, go ahead. Caller, go ahead.
Yeah, yes, this is Mike Neal.
We can hear you, Mike. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, regarding the attempt to basically take out a loan, I believe the original statement was they want to initiate a bond issue for the full $52 million that the Groundwater Authority originally wanted to go after and get from the Water District in Searles Valley. I just start out with a real simple statement to proceed what I'm going to expound on, and my statement to this is no, no, and no. People in this valley, as you well know, are not happy with the huge fees that they're being made to pay in order to use the most fundamental element essential to life, second to air. They don't appreciate the fact that 5,000 protest votes were completely ignored, nor the fact that the 3,000 sufficient signatures for a referendum vote were just sleight of hand passed off with a dismissatory statement by your county council. We are not happy with what's going on with the GA, period. There's just tons of people in town that do not want this, and the simple fact is that the GA went to the Water District to try to strong-arm them into getting a loan because they knew that they really didn't have the resources. Why else would they have done that? And you really got nothing because you have all these lawsuits going on and another one coming down the pipe, and who knows how many more you're going to force people to file a suit against you in court because you're not listening to people as you never have as a GA board from day one, with the current present exception of Mr. Arturo is the only member who seems to listen and care about what people are concerned about on this issue. You really just, like I said before, you got nothing, and of course your consultant is going to make it look good for you because guess what? He's in the business to make money as a consultant. He's not going to just say, no, sorry, you don't stand a chance. Don't bother, I won't take your money. You knew that was going to happen from the start, and they're going to paint a rosy picture, but anybody that would take out money, put their own money into a bond based on such a flimsy foundation as this GA has as far as backing, financial backing, with all the lawsuits and everything else, would be an absolute fool to put their money into it. And I think you could go out and get $50 million or even $25 million on the basis of the financial standing the GA has in the just faulty and precarious legal footing that you've got going on currently is just ridiculous to even think about. That's all.
Next caller. Caller, go ahead. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, this is Renee West Lusk. I just want to say that I support the Groundwater Authority going ahead with this bond issue. I just want to just re-clarify that the only role that the Water District plays in this bond issue is they're just collecting the replenishment and the GA fee. I mean the extraction fees, correct? They have no other role. Are they required to sign anything with this bond agreement?
Not to my knowledge, Renee.
Okay, thank you. I give you my full support on this bond issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I believe that's the end of public comment. There's no action to be taken, so we will move on to item number D. Carol, you're back up.
Mr. Chairman, so last month, the board asked staff to look into the board rotation for chair and council, and I believe, to speak to the water district and find out what the plans were. And I've been successful in delegating much of my report here to others, and so I'm going to ask Keith to further explain the recommendation on this report.
Okay, and I'm going to try to face the microphone the whole time I do it, so don't think I'm being awkward by not looking at you guys. Last meeting, there was a request made by the board to add an item regarding the GSA board rotation, and we had the opportunity to take a look at that and talk to staff, and so I'll let you know. I'm about to tell you what was determined. First off, regarding the rotation, the Joint Powers Agreement provides simply that the chair will be appointed annually and serves at the pleasure of the board, meaning can be removed at any time. In the bylaw document, it provides for this annual rotation that we've done consistently until now, starting in 2017, where the chairmanship of the board rotates and the district council rotates. It's important to note that the roles of the chairman, obviously it's presiding over the meeting, which you're very well aware of. It's also a role in helping to set the agenda. So it's important that the chair be involved in all of the potential items before the board. At the last meeting, a comment was made about the propriety of having the rotation in light of the fact that the water district would be rotating and both the current representative from the water district and water district council have recused themselves at various times during the last year on various topics. Generally, they have recused themselves regarding all of the pending litigation, as in many of those litigation situations, the water district feels that it's adverse to the GA potentially. In addition, the water district representative recused himself from matters involving enforcing the replenishment fee on the grounds that since the water district pays the replenishment fee, it would be unseemly and create a bad appearance if the water district would be attempting to enforce the fee. So in light of those decisions by the water district, the question was raised, can the water district then be the chair going forward? And, as a legal matter, it's possible for them to be the chair, but for that to happen, we would need to have an understanding about how this would work in light of the water district's prior decisions to recuse itself for conflict. Staff has discussed this matter internally, and we got a report back from the water district that the water district's attorney, Jim Worth, was not planning to serve as general counsel starting in January, and that the water district would support just leaving the general counsel as it is for now, but that the water district had an interest in having their representative chair the meetings next year. And so with that in mind, I would turn it over to the board for discussion.
Any discussion or comments from the board?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is John Vallejo.
Go ahead, Director Vallejo.
I understand I had some audio issues earlier. Are you able to hear me clearly now?
You are loud and clear. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I raised this issue and requested that this item be put on today's agenda. I think it was summarized pretty well by Mr. Lemieux what my concerns were. It's interesting to note that the Water District Council is not going to be taking or intending to take the legal counsel for the Groundwater Authority.
Excuse me, Director Vallejo? You were loud and clear, but then once you started talking, we're getting a little distortion.
Okay.
So
I'll try to speak slowly and loudly if that's better.
But that seems to be working
Director
good.
Vallejo, this might be my opportunity to say you need to speak directly into the microphone.
I appreciate that. So this was the agenda item that I had initially raised as a request to be on today's agenda at the last meeting. I think Mr. Lemieux adequately summarized the concerns that I raised, as well as some others that had been discussed. I think it's telling that the Water District Council, Mr. Worth, is not intending to take the rotation next year. And I think it's concerning that the Water District representative is intending to take the chair role for the regular rotation. And I think it's concerning based on the coherence of this board's duties, and more specifically, the idea that there are a number of items that the Water District are routinely recusing themselves from in terms of issues that this Groundwater Authority are dealing with, specifically with regard to ongoing litigation matters and concerns, their stated concerns at their meetings that I've been listening to about the fee and about the just general operations of this Groundwater Authority. I think it would be prudent for this authority to move forward with the rotation back to Kern County and then to the city. And then hopefully at that point, the litigation matters will have been resolved, and the contention that the Groundwater District or the Water District seems to join in with some of the other parties that are suing us. Hopefully that contention will have been resolved at that point.
Can you speak
Director
into
Vallejo,
the mic, please?
We lost you again about maybe 3-4 sentences ago. So
to summarize, I think it would be most prudent for this agency to move forward in a coherent manner and to avoid the logistical issues and to avoid the stated potential conflict issues from the Water District. If we just assigned the Kern County representative to be the next rotation, followed by the city after that, and then the Water District would be up in line again about in 3 cycles. And at that point, hopefully, the litigation matters that are throwing a wrench into a lot of our otherwise smooth operations would be resolved, and there would be no more potential or actual conflicts with the Water District folks, and we could get back to business as usual. And I know today's not an action item. This is just an update, but my request would be to put an action item on the agenda for next month if the Water District isn't willing to willingly forego its rotation at the next year.
very good. Thank you, Director Vallejo. Any other comments from the board?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry. You wanted to go first?
You go.
The JPA was set up in such a manner to give each one of the 3 major agencies an equal opportunity to chair this group. I see no reason why we should deviate from that now. I think the Water District deserves the right to do it. It's our turn. And frankly, we do provide the large majority of all the funding for this agency. I think it's our turn, and we intend to take it. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Peters?
I definitely understand Director Vallejo's concerns. Being recusing yourself on quite a few issues, I think is not exactly consistent with being able to set the agenda and work through some of those issues. But if Director Rotora has other thoughts as far as how there could be that separation and that objectivity, it'd definitely be something to consider. So I think if we do bring this back as an agenda item, it's something I would like to look into a little more in the meantime.
Very good. Director Ittnar?
Yeah, I'm not particularly concerned about the fact that there might be policy differences, even about fundamental issues regarding the groundwater authority, because we are five members who each have different positions and views based on who we are representing. I'm a little concerned about the logistics of how it would work with the amount of recusals, but I definitely be interested in looking into this and hearing a little more from Director Rotora about how it would work with the recusals and everything. But I'm genuinely on the fence on this.
Thank you, Director Ittnar. So I just want to state that I feel that these are real valid concerns that are before us. I'm in direct support of bringing this back at our next meeting and hearing any additional information that Director Rotora may want to bring forward, as far as how they may think that they can handle it. But I think it would be wise to have it on the agenda on the next meeting. So seeing no further comments or go ahead.
Let me ask a question on behalf of staff then. I think I heard Member Phillips say that he would like some help or direction on if the Water District were to chair the meetings, what we would do, how would we handle these conflict situations and frankly, we have 5 litigation items that are monthly. So we do have to coordinate with that. And when we do that on a staff level, everybody should be aware that Water District staff does not participate, obviously, at all in those discussions. There are other topics like that that have come up. For example, board should be aware that when we were discussing some of the water purchases for a while, the Water District was not participating. They are participating now, however. And then I mentioned any kind of enforcement of the replenishment fee. Water District staff and directors do not participate in. So I just want to make it clear that that's how that issue has been staked out by the Water District. I don't know the answer to the question of what do we do, for example, if we're doing a closed session or setting the agenda regarding those items on a monthly basis. Who's responsible for that? Who would we report to? That's the question I would have on behalf of staff.
Understood, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit more. I don't have, not having been the chairman of this board before, an intimate knowledge of how that process goes, but I know as chairman of the Kern County Board of Supervisors, I have very little input on setting the agenda, no more than any other board member would have, and that is something done by staff, and maybe that's something that we should look at as a model going forward now that we have a water resource manager in place, a GA manager in place, as far as staff forming those agendas.
Well, I appreciate that. It is very useful for staff to have a chair that they can approach on matters before we put things on so that we don't go heading off into the woods accidentally on things. So we would need somebody to give us a thumbs up on items and how they're presented on those topics. And so the question would be, if that's not the chair, who is it, I guess, is the way I would couch the question.
Understood. Well, maybe we can all, or maybe staff can communicate with each of the board members respectively and just get some thoughts on that. I don't know what that process would be at this time, but I'm sure each of the staff members, as we move forward, would be able to provide, their thoughts and opinions on how that could be structured. But again, that's not to say I'm leaning one way or another, but maybe this is just a conversation we could all provide a little bit of input on before we make a decision.
So so for clarity, is what I'm hearing, so if we were to change the rotation, we would need to present it in the form of a resolution amending the bylaws maybe temporarily or something, would be the way to handle it. And that would simply do that. If there is a different approach that involves, rather than changing the rotation, involves some kind of modification to how we prepare agendas and conduct the meetings, then I'll need some instruction from somebody about what you'd like to see in that. Right now, I'm hearing one suggestion is simply don't do the rotation. I think I heard Director Vallejo say that. If that's the direction of the board, if you want to bring back a resolution to that effect, I can draft that. If it's something different, the reason I'm asking these questions, if it's something different, though, that doesn't involve canceling the rotation or advancing the rotation, I guess would be a way to put it, then I need to get a better handle on what it is you're looking for us to do.
I'll need to get a better handle on it before I give you that answer. So we'll have to, I mean, for me personally, I don't have that answer of what the structure would be, and I don't even have a solid answer on which way I think we should go. But I think we have some time to consider some options before this comes back as an action item, if that works for you guys.
I don't have the answer today. I think it would behoove the board to come up with the options that would be available. Obviously, litigation is a separate issue, and anything doing with the ongoing litigation would be a separate issue. And there is an alternate, obviously, that would rotate back to the county. And I think there are options that would work. We just need to actually look at what those options are.
And just to be clear, my thought was, in terms of an action item at the next agenda, would be the vote of the board to remove the member, because that would be the simple way to do it without having to amend the bylaws. But I see, the other option in terms of amending the bylaws is about the same.
John, I hate to have you repeat yourself again, but if you could, please restate.
Yeah, so just to be clear, my thought on the agenda item would be a vote to remove the next officer instead of amending the bylaws. But, it accomplishes the same thing if we have an amendment to the bylaws to change the rotation as well. So either way works, but that was the action item I was looking for in terms of the next agenda.
So what you were suggesting is, rather than change the bylaws, leave them as is, but make the vote, since the chair would sit at the pleasure of the board, just sort of preemptively say that it's a vote of no confidence, and then it just would go to the next in rotation.
Well, I mean, it would be a vote to remove the chair, and it doesn't have to be for cause. It doesn't have to be for no confidence. I think the reasons are pretty well understood in terms of the practical issues. So, yeah, it's just exercising the ability of a majority of this board to essentially remove an officer without cause.
You're right. I misspoke. No cause is required.
Thank you, Director Vallejo. So I'm in favor with moving forward with Director Vallejo's recommendation. So I'd like to see it moved on to our next meeting on the agenda.
Just for clarification, real quick, Keith and Chairman Heyman, when it would be the actual, I can't remember the name of it, but the meeting where you would vote to elect officers, would that normally be scheduled for our next meeting, or would that be at the beginning of the year? Do you know?
My recollection is that in our system, it just rotates automatically.
Okay. There's not an election of officers normally?
Not that I recall. April, am I
Right.
misremembering
The
that?
bylaws were set up so Kern County started as chair, vice chair was the city, and then the district was just a director, and it rotates.
Okay.
Unless we say otherwise, that will continue to be the rotation.
Understood. Okay, I just wanted that little point of clarification.
So I heard, I guess, 2 directors saying come back with a resolution. Is there a third to give us direction to do that? You're not making the decision. You're just telling me what to bring back.
Okay. Yeah, I'll get on board with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further comments from the board? Hearing none, we will move to public comment. We'll start with the floor.
Nick Panzer again. I saw this item in the agenda and read it with some curiosity. I just assumed that the ordinary rotation would move forward. What I would be most interested in hearing about, this is literally off the top of my head because I wasn't kind of ready for what has transpired. I would love to hear from the chairman of the water district and anybody else in authority on that board come to this meeting in December and speak, whether or not and how you move forward in posturing to get ready for December. I'd sure like to hear what they have to say about their guy taking the chair. They're a big player in this. That's the bread and butter. That's where the money's coming from. And I'd sure like to hear from their chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Panzer. Any other comment, public comment from the floor? Seeing none, we'll move to the phone lines. Caller, go ahead.
Yes. Can you hear me? Mike Neal. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. When I saw this on the agenda, I really had to just shake my head at the just apparent causes behind even this coming up on the agenda today and the discussion that we've had to suffer through here. It just goes down to the level of almost a childish. We want to get back at the water district kind of a thing here. Apparently, Mr. Vallejo has been tagged as the one to bring it up because he gets to sit out of sight of everybody calling on the phone. And, his only real purpose on being on this board is to be obstructionist when it comes to, getting any single gallon of water out of the aqueduct up in the mountains. Other than that, it's just been a yes man vote on his part all along, and so much so for the rest of the board members. Now, the counselors that you got supporting you, of course, were not happy, as evidenced by Mr. Lemieux's attack on the water district recently because they didn't want to finance, this replenishment fee for you. And to be just honest and truthful, the water district and their representative currently and the prior one have been the only ones on this board who have even showed any evidence that they listen to and or care about what the people of this valley want. And now that it looks like there's some danger, which is hard to see what possible danger could be presented by one of the district members being the chair of this meeting, which all they do is, they just act as chair, and that's it. They don't have any special powers, any special leeway, anything else. And for you people to act confused, well, what do we do when he has to recuse himself? Well, what do you got a vice chair for? I mean, how hard is that? And let's just point it out. You just don't want a water district person being chair of the board because that makes him look a little bit more important and gives him a little tiny bit more sway in how the meetings go and how people get either do or don't get listened to from the public. And I'll tell you for sure, if we need anybody to go, it's some of you other guys and not Mr. Rotora. He's the only voice of clear-headed thinking and a good heart towards the people. Out of a whole lot of you, he's the only one there who really cares about what happens to people in this valley, and it's been plain and evident the whole time along. Thank you.
Next caller. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, this is Renee Westelusk, and I just support the board in the chairman, Mr. Heyman, and Mr. Vallejo in looking into this further and coming up with a resolution on how to deal with this, because I'm a water district customer. I've always supported my water district, but this year's past behavior personally got me all upset. And I'm tired of the fighting, and it constantly is coming from the water district. And the other thing I'm worried about is this adjudication that's being thrust on every parcel owner in this valley. And I'm worried I might get sued twice over this because I'm in a homeowners association. And I am tired of obstruction and fighting. I just want the Groundwater Authority to get their job done. And we don't have time to be waiting around to buy water rights and haggle over all these things. So I support the chairman in looking into a resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Next caller.
We don't have time to be waiting around to buy water rights. And
Caller, go ahead.
Hello.
Caller.
Hello.
Yes, caller, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. This is Mike Sonat. I'd just like to remind everybody that the Water District represents the majority of the people in this valley, including the city of Ridgecrest. City of Ridgecrest represents the Navy. Inyo represents the Navy. San Bernardino represents the Navy. And the Kern County is just trying to cover their tails for past mismanagement. So this is not about the fact that the Groundwater Authority needs to worry about Mr. Rotora or the Water District sitting in the chair. We are the chair, and that should become clear to you because the people in the Indian Wells Valley do not accept the plan. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further public comment on the lines, we will end with item 11, 10D, and we will now move on to item 11, the PAC and TAC report, and that will be with Mr. Dave Janis.
Thank you. Thank you. We had a very good, if lengthy, PAC meeting on this, and I'll report out on a few things. I would ask you to read the report in its entirety because I'm going to hit some high points, but there are good comments that I think all the board members should hear throughout it. And I'll start with we elected our new vice chair, Judy Decker, was confirmed by that, as you see in item number 5. The meat of the discussion was all around item number 6 and item number 7. And so that's where I'll go into a little more depth. None of the recommendations for 6 or 7, these are not reporting back to your committee, your board, what our recommendations are, because what we've decided to do is keep refining those, and I'll go over how that is, but take nothing I present in this report as a final report or recommendation to you at this time, but some indication as the direction we're proceeding and what we're likely to bring back to you, hopefully after the next meeting. So the communication and engagement plan was the subject of this primarily, and we had a subcommittee, as you're aware, go off and work on this, and they brought back a very good set of recommendations that coalesced down to 5 focus areas for the GA to bring awareness to the public and better communicate to the public the outstanding issues that we think still remain in this process. Those 5 were in the middle of that first paragraph, numbered
overview documents and conceptual examples of individual handouts, a question and answer or frequently asked question type handout, a schedule or POEM type tracking of projects tied to finances and schedule, a GA website upgrade, and fifth was a more formal dialogue opportunities by the GA itself. Those 5 topics in broad form were agreed to by the committee. 3 of them were agreed entirely by the committee. Judy Decker submitted a minority report, if you will, that was contained as a part of the report, and that led to lengthy discussion. The report and the minority report, I'll highlight, there were broad acceptance of the 5, but great concern in item number 1 expressed over the overview documents and the samples. The concerns focused on 2 major areas. One was the agency responsible for putting out a document. So, for example, if the recommended document was each stakeholder group should have a document that addresses their concerns and impact statement. What does it mean to me if I'm a large ag? What does it mean to me if I'm small ag? What does it mean to me if I'm a water district customer, domestic well owner, all of Searles Valley, Trona? What does it mean to them, so that they would have an individual sheet they could look on and see what does it mean to me, and they could look and see what the impact of the other stakeholder groups that they were not in was. And the source and responsibility for filling out that document and providing it came to a head with the discussion of the water district. Is it the water district that's responsible for that because it bears the primary implementation of the rates to them, or is it the GA because it has also 2 major factors or more that contribute to those rates? So that was sent back to the committee, and I'll get into more about that. The second concern in that was the propriety, especially because this was controversial, and these would be draft documents that the Policy Advisory Committee themselves would provide you a draft example, because the draft example could contain our interpretation of numbers that are available that we might not have the authority to do that, and there are multiple variables that go into those numbers from various sources, and if those numbers were presented in a draft document, they could easily be misunderstood by the public and taken with more impact than we meant to have. So those 2 factors were one that involved lengthy discussion. You'll see a summary of it right below. What we led to on the second page was the PAC action for number 6. So we generally supported it, again, the 5, but specifically with respect to the overview documents, the subcommittee was requested or asked to go back into session and approach a recommendation on item number 1 to identify any significant gaps in information that the public communications should fill. So first, they're going to identify gaps, and one of those gaps may in fact be what I just referred to was the impact statements to user groups. And within each gap, what are the sub-areas in that gap that should be filled? And what I'm leading to is, rather than provide an example document with controversial numbers and source for the origination of the document that we could not agree on, that we would not provide an example, but we would give you a list of, here's what we hear from our constituents. Since each one of us represents an individual user group or stakeholder group, what are the kinds of things that should be in an impact statement to us? So we'd have the gap might be, in this case, an impact statement, and the sub-gaps are all the sub-areas within that gap for that particular user, or stakeholder group. So they're going to bring that back there to take into account the lengthy conversation and all the inputs they had from all the PAC members and the public that attended the meeting, and go through all five items require some modification to a degree. So they've taken the task to take that back, and when they come back, they're going to address the five in consideration of all those discussion items that we came up with, and document both the areas of agreement and, if any, the areas of disagreement and the rationale for each. So we have a cohesive report that they're going to bring back to the PAC in its entirety next time, and we'll be looking to reach agreement. And what we intend to pass to you, forward to you as our recommendations out of that, is where we agree unanimously, where we agree in majority, and where we disagree, a minority report, for example, as authorized by the bylaws and directed by the bylaws, with the rationale for it. So our objective, and I hope we can get to it in the next meeting, is to complete the maximum amount of full agreement that we can have between us, plus document any individual differences and the rationale. So with that came item number B, review the individual, or we had individual C&E plan recommendations that we had made in the interim. Was there anything else, changes in the C&E plan that we would recommend? And we largely do not. There specifically are some updates required, and we're leaning towards recommending that staff periodically update them, like changes in leadership positions. We've got two that are different on this board, three since that PAC draft was written. We have redistricting going on right now. We may very well be in different districts with different representatives and contact points. So there would be some update to it required, but you're not going to get from us a wholesale change to the C&E plan. The second thing we're going to take into account is you gave us, or we received just before the first reconvene meeting last time, an example of the Owens Basin C&E plan up in Director Vallejo's vicinity. And we reviewed that as an example of, that was an updated plan, and we're updating ours. And did they have a good suggestion? And one of them was for, let me see if I can quote it, because I can never remember the exact title. Essential Communication Strategy Topics that they had included in their plan. And it occurred to some of us that exact phrase is maybe what we're talking about in our 5 items, specifically the item number 1 of those 5. And so after we go through this process with the reviewing the recommendations, the updated recommendations from the C&E subcommittee on the 5 areas, we will then judge those against, do those provide an opportunity to make the C&E plan better by including perhaps a small paragraph, may only be 3 sentences with 5 bullets under it, and saying, here are essential topics that came out of it that are identical, in fact, to what we're going to put in our recommendations next time. That's a possibility, or we may just come back, if we don't agree on that, we may just come back and say, here are the areas that need to periodically be updated by staff, but we think the plan was a good one. So we've set our next meeting. I got ahead of myself. The second major issue we took on was the draft schedule for the GA, and we got it very shortly before our meeting. It was provided at a very top level, and it was provided as a draft for comment, knowing that it needed a lot more work, and they were going to work on that, but they wanted our inputs with regards to what some areas we would like to see expanded on, things for inclusion in it. And during the presentation of it, General Manager Carol Thomas Kiefer talked about wanting to get inputs from the PAC as to what things might be taken out of it, so that recognizing that anything we put into a schedule that we were requesting be linked clearly to finances, source of finances, budgeted finances, and expenditures linked to schedule, that it linked to finances, that we have it clear in everyone's minds, the linkage, but that costs money down. If it's done to a level of POA&M, like we saw during the GSP development, which was one focused project, that's very costful and time consuming, and we know we have a budgetary concern. So we're gonna try to provide that. We did take action. And there's a list of preliminary comments we had on it, but we, not having had time for full review, we plan to bring it back for our individual comments, and it was already in process and the software is in process, as Carol presented some of the work that's being done on that. So we wanted to inform that. The PAC members are providing individual inputs to Carol Thomas to me, to forward to Carol during this week. And I'm reminding the PAC members of the deadline, which was to be this meeting. And then we'll take it up and talk publicly about those individual comments next time and give focused recommendations to the board overall about what we're looking at for a schedule. But it's got to include some of those things we've talked about that are referenced in here. We recognize, given the time and the new software, that was not in this one, but an annual level schedule that starts in 2022, we needed more than that. So our next regular meeting, because of the holidays, we're not going to meet on Thanksgiving. So we're going to meet the 30th in these chambers on Tuesday, 30th of November, and then we'll take up where our Christmas meeting will be moved to accommodate all the members and their family time. That's my report, and I'd invite your attention again to the details on this, and I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jans. We'll put it back to the board for any questions or comments.
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Director Ittmeyer?
Good job, Dave.
Do you have any comments?
No question. Nothing.
Director Vallejo?
Is this for closing comments or comments on
just comments on to Mr. Janis on this topic?
No closing comments here.
Okay. I don't really have any questions. Well, I guess it's more of a question, but so on the communication engagement, so the ultimate goal is to have a means to bring topics and information to the public on the various aspects of what we're doing. I mean, is that kind of an overview, in a nutshell, kind of overview?
Yeah, the communication plans outline, the communication plan as it exists today outlines that. What we believe was lacking in our review, and I will take that back. I needed one more comment I need to make, but the communications plan, perhaps some of us view a great attempt was made in several areas. In other places, the GA fell short. And there are, in fact, people that aren't aware of it, but at this point in time, we believe generally that the public has had an opportunity. However, there are certain key focus areas and questions that the answers are not out there, or not out there in simple fashion. And these are the focus areas, if you will, that we think we need to answer the questions. A basic history example. That was one sheet we agreed that we could provide an example. It's primarily extracted from the GSP itself. So a focused history of how we've got here. A condensed version of what is the plan in the GSP. Something simple that folks can look at. I'm giving you examples. And then another prime example, the one we spent the majority of the time on, was what does it mean to me? You know, what are the impacts and worst case, best case, what does it mean to me? And those are different for every one of the stakeholders. So that's a key. That's an area we think we need to make we, the GA, you, the GA, and we are policy committee members, need to focus on to provide the information that we hear a need for from our folks that we represent, the stakeholder groups, and overall. So simplified ways to focus the communications. Then there are recommendations like the more informal meetings, evening meetings, some of those types of things that you'll see in this, a general Q&A fax, a method of pointing, an improvement to the website is happening as it's already underway, by the way, but that will go a great way, long way towards getting a lot of this information that we're proposing out there. However, I will say when we come back next time, we've asked for and haven't yet received inputs from any of this board about your experience in implementing the plan and your critique of the plan. It could be from individual members or from the staff. We would welcome and encourage your perception of this as to what the plan needed to do, or you could give us topics that would help in what we're trying to develop that I'm reporting on today.
So do we see this as a public relations tool to educate or to bring information to the public?
Yeah, I view, and I believe all of the PAC does, we view the C&E plan as the implementation of exactly that. And these are public relations tools, and these are the specific focus areas that during and after the development of the GSP, the gaps in public understanding that needed to be filled.
Agree. And from my own personal perspective, I feel this is one of the more important things that we could be focusing on, as a PAC and TAC committees and as the GA itself, the board members to really see this through and because I don't see us as having, I think that's one area that, the GA as a whole, the public relations aspect of it, we could definitely use improvements. And so I commend you and the PAC and TAC for your hard work. I see this as a real important part of our process. So, and if I heard you right, we need input from the board, and I think we might have had this. I'm having a little deja vu here that we may have mentioned this sometime in the past.
I'm foot stomping that. Yes.
Okay. So I think the board heard the conversation, so we'll work to get our input into you. Hearing no further board comments, we'll bring it to public comment. Do we have any public comment from the floor? Seeing none, any public comment on the phones? Seeing none, then we will end on that. And at this time, we'll move to item number 12, closing comments. I'd like to start with Commander Turner, who's been patiently waiting.
So no comments for the Navy today.
No comments. Thank you, sir. Director Ratora.
I would like to just briefly touch on one comment that was made earlier by Nick Panzer that had gone over my head earlier, and that is associated with the loan from the augmentation fund to the pumping fee fund, and that has to do, and you look at it, it's pretty obvious, and yet it wasn't actually talked about till Nick stood up. There is no mechanism. If you look at the income to the pumping fee, it's not going to be going up. If anything, with reduced pumping, it's only going to go down. And yet next year, if you look at it, even though it probably will need to borrow less money than it borrows this year because of some one-time paybacks, it's going to have to probably borrow more money next year, and then more money the year after that. And there's no mechanism in there to actually pay any of that money back. And so what he said was, I think, a very crucial statement, is we need to start looking ahead and looking forward. How are we going to pay that money back? We've told the public that the augmentation fund is going to buy a Table A water entitlement, and yet 5 years from now, how much money are we going to have in that fund? We initially said we're going to have 24 million, at least from the water district, not from Cerros Valley. At some point in time, we need to look hard at our finances and figure out how can we make the pumping fee pay for everything it's supposed to be paying for, and still allow the augmentation fee to pay for what we told the public that we were taking their money for. Thank you.
Dr. Peters?
No comment.
Director Ittnar?
No comments.
And Director Vallejo?
Yeah, just one comment. Please let me know if I'm not talking into the mic. So we've heard a lot of requests today, and multiple requests from Mr. Nugent himself about us answering whether or not we will engage in the facilitation offer by the State Water Board, or DWR, excuse me. And the question is an interesting one, and speaking for myself, I think that this agency should engage in a facilitation if and when the parties to this facilitation aren't suing us. I think it's a little bit awkward, if not unwise, to engage in this facilitation while we are in the middle of ongoing litigation between Mojave Pistachio and the Groundwater Authority, and Cerros Valley and the Groundwater Authority, as well as the adjudication matters. So I wouldn't advise this board to engage in the facilitation while we're being sued and while these other lawsuits are pending. But if and when those are resolved, I think we should get involved with the facilitation to continue the dialogue in a way that won't compromise our ability to move forward and make sure that we have a sustainable groundwater future in this basin.
Thank you, Director Vallejo. I just have a comment in regards to Director Rotorua. I think we would all have greener budgets if there wasn't all these lawsuits going on. So, and with that, I think that closes our meeting. And our next meeting will be on December 8th, 2021. And this meeting is adjourned.